When the phone rang, Emily was relieved. She hoped it was her friend Jennifer calling. Talking to her would take her mind off her unhappy thoughts and maybe even complain or ask for advice. But no. As if determined to ruin her mood, her mother-in-law called. Emily had been thinking about her unfulfilling life with Jason and was seriously considering divorce. Not a possibility, but a necessity. There was no life for them anyway. But Emily didn't want that. And so in the midst of such thoughts about divorce, Barbara Smith calls, as if sensing something. No, she probably won't be upset by the news of what her daughter-in-law is up to. It might even make her happy. Barbara Smith had never liked Emily, not that she hated her or had done anything nasty. But this dislike was felt in everything. However, she was not going to let her mother-in-law in on her secret thoughts. Emily didn't plan to talk about Jason's troubles with her mother-in-law either. Barbara Smith wouldn't say anything intelligible. It was none of her business. Just as she had listened to the news of her son's impending marriage with complete indifference, she was not likely to be impressed by the divorce. Except to blame Emily herself for failing to keep her family together, for failing to make her boy happy, or even for failing to have children. Yeah, Jason didn't have kids. And for what reason, no one could say. Emily got married more to become a mom sooner than later. She really wanted a baby. That's not surprising since she was an orphan herself. She had no relatives, so she wanted a baby. And not just one. The first year after marriage, she waited for pregnancy. The second went to the doctors, who unanimously argued that there are no obstacles. It would be a good idea to check her husband. Jason refused, but Emily begged him, and he was checked. Again, no one could say anything. Primary infertility. That's the answer. What kind of infertility? No one could really explain it. Desperate, Emily went to a lot of women. Clearly a waste of money. Jason didn't care much about infertility, because he'd never dreamed of having children. At first he'd said that yes, of course, children were wonderful. And then he waved his hand at all her worries with children, Emily. You need to do things, not change diapers. And finally confessed, and I'm even glad that we have no children, and I will be glad if they will never be. As they say, God didn't give it to us, and thank God. If you're so keen to mess around with little kids, go to your girlfriend sometimes. Oh, for 5 minutes to look at those kids. It's fun, but it'll make you sick. But think about it, the snot, the screaming. Who needs all that? Her husband's incomprehension really hurt Emily. She couldn't imagine a life without children. Well, as long as they can, that's possible. But time goes by so fast. How many couples break up after many years of life together because of childlessness? A man in his 50s can marry a young woman and become a father. But what will happen to his abandoned wife? She will be left with only a lonely old age. So far, they were far away from old age. But Emily realized that no one would be spared. And with time came the realization that her Jason really didn't want children for nothing. After a couple of years of living with him, Emily realized that Jason wouldn't make a good father. Nor would he make a spouse. At first, the relationship seemed to resemble love, a family, but then what love? Jason was hardly ever home. The only excuse was, well, what did you want? You married a businessman, not a locksmith. I've got a lot to do, Emily. Yeah, I'm traveling again. I don't know, maybe a week, maybe 2. He answered all her claims and went away, leaving his wife alone. It was more and more unbearable every year. She had to leave her job at the insistence of her husband. There were no children, and what was left for her? The only occupation she found remote work, giving her a small income and the illusion of communication with people. But only an illusion. And Emily was sometimes very lonely. Should she get a cat or a dog, as some people suggested? She didn't need such a substitute for a personal life. Emily even began to think about adoption and hinted at it. But she got such a response that she never even mentioned it again. Have you completely lost your mind, adopting someone who's been abandoned by their own father and mother who are probably criminals or drunks? Jason said, killing all her hopes. Do you have any idea what kind of heredity there is? Read the newspapers. You'll see what happens to adoptive parents when those adopted children grow up. If that's the fate you want, please don't have me. He just doesn't want kids and seems to be doing something to keep them away. Emily thought sometimes. That's what her mother-in-law called her from such thoughts. Also not promising anything good. Also will start now her stupid questions. "Is Jason home?" Barbara Smith asked. "No, are you sitting alone again?" "Yes, dear," Emily said. "Good wives don't always take their husbands on business trips." "Well, I mean, it's always Emily's fault. What can I do? Maybe the mother-in-law was right. It is her fault that they're childless. And in the fact that her husband does not want to stay at home and constantly runs away somewhere in an attempt to earn more money too, she. And it was impossible to say that they live somehow rich. Jason is always hoping for something, for some incredible income, which one day will fall on their heads. But it doesn't happen yet. Of course, they are not poor at all, better off than most. But if anyone was happy about it, it wasn't for long. And neither did Jason. He dreamed of so much more. Strangely enough, Blood's voice was especially kind, even ingratiating. I've never heard her talk like that before. "Emily, sweetheart," "Hello," Barbara Smith said. "Where's Jason? Did he go away for a long time again?" "No, not for a long time," said her daughter-in-law as friendly as possible. "He should be back tonight." "Oh, good," the mother-in-law continued ingratiatingly. "I wanted to talk to you. You know, I have a request. It's not an ordinary one, but it's very important." "Well, of course, Barbara Smith. Anything I can do," Emily replied in surprise, not knowing what she was being asked. And here was the request. "You know, Jason is probably going to a very important negotiation in the near future. Foreign investors. And Jason thinks it's very important. It's going to be a big deal after these talks." He said something like that, Emily said uncertainly. She and her husband hadn't really had any conversations in a long time, much less about work. Jason thought she didn't know anything about it, and it was better for her to stay out of it. He'd talked about some negotiations, but she didn't know the details. "Now, my dear, I beg you, don't let him go to these negotiations," Barbara Smith exclaimed, surprised beyond measure. "How can I keep him out?" Emily asked in amazement. "You said it was very important to him. That's what Jason said." "Oh, my dear, you can't let him in, but you can't let him in. Do whatever you want. Beg, plead, threaten." Then it was clear to Emily that for some reason this was very important to her mother-in-law too. Why else? Her daughter-in-law had become both cute and dear to her. Emily was really confused. How could she not let her husband to some important negotiations? What, she wondered, could she threaten him with? "So maybe you could talk to him about it yourself? He would listen to you much faster." She objected uncertainly. "But Barbara Smith, almost crying," said he, "what are you?" "Emily, you know our relations have been bad enough lately as it is. He won't listen to me. I had a fight with him because he refused to take me in his car to visit, and I really resented him, but for nothing. I didn't even know I was going to have this stupid negotiation. And there's no way. Jason's going to be allowed to be there. You know, it's very dangerous for him. And for you too, by the way. I mean, for both of you. Try to understand me, or at least just hear me," Barbara Smith pleaded. "I realize it's important to you, but I don't see how to do it. I haven't had the best relationship with him lately either." She decided to still reveal some relationship secrets to her mother-in-law. "But still, daughter, he loves you," I know continued to convince the mother-in-law. "You're a mother, and apparently you know more about these negotiations than I do." Emily thought grudgingly, regretting that she hadn't had time to tell Barbara Smith that things weren't going so well, and that they were headed for divorce. And now, suddenly, such a strange request. But at the same time, an uneasiness flared up in her heart. But my mother-in-law wouldn't just lie in front of me and show such emotion. "Barbara Smith, tell me, what is the threat of all this? Why can't you negotiate? Maybe you're being unreasonable." Emily wanted to know as much as she could so she had something to talk about. The Samoshes. "Oh, honey, it's a long story. But in short, they're very, very bad people. I mean, they're extremely dangerous to deal with. I can't even imagine what would happen if he went into that negotiation and made a deal. Honestly, Emily, believe me, I would never bother you with a request like that. But it's literally a matter of life and death right now." Those words did indeed startle Emily a little. Apparently, the matter was really important if her mother-in-law was so insistent. Yes, of course, still, it was strange that Barbara Smith herself hadn't tried to talk to her son. Whether they had a fight or not, If things were that important, Jason had always respected his mother's opinion, and he would heed her warning. But on the other hand, he could try to save his husband. She'd had some influence on her husband, and maybe if she could keep him out of the deal, she could save him. She didn't want to think about anything that threatened Jason's life. But if she could help him that way, maybe the relationship would improve. Yes, Emily, deep down, didn't really want a divorce, kept hoping that she and Jason could still be together and be happy someday. Why not? After all, she had promised her mother-in-law to do her best, even though she realized that not much depended. In the evening, however, Emily, hoping very much for success, had a rather difficult conversation with her husband. She prepared for it carefully. She cooked a delicious dinner, set the table, dressed up herself, dressed as her husband liked. He was very surprised but also pleased because he loved such evenings with his family. "What do you want to ask me?" he said with a smile. "Well, don't ask me to ask you. Shall I persuade you? Moreover, if you refuse me, you don't even know what will happen to us, and our relationship, and our life in general." "Hey, don't scare me. Just say whatever you want to say. Only if you're talking about kids again, it's better not to start, not to ruin this beautiful evening," Jason said seriously. "No, not about kids, unfortunately. Although I'd love to talk about it, but some other time. I'm going to have to ask you to cancel tomorrow's negotiations," Emily said firmly. "What are you, crazy? Are you pushing your plate away?" Jason asked. "A lot depends on this negotiation. Don't you see why you're even thinking about this? I'd rather it was really about the kids. At least it wouldn't surprise me." "I understand. But trust me, our future, or even our lives, depend on you doing what I ask. You don't have to go. I'll explain everything later. Please stay home tomorrow." "Well, that's not how things work. They'll be expecting me, and suddenly I won't show up. For no particular reason. I can't say my wife wouldn't let me come. Yeah, I'd be laughed at. I don't know what kind of threat you're talking about. They're very honorable partners. And they don't mean me any harm. I realize my words don't mean much to you. But honestly, if you don't listen to me this time, I'm afraid this is where all our conversations will end cold, out of fear," Emily said. "And how will they end? Do you want to leave me?" Emily knew Jason didn't want a divorce either. Not because he loved her, but simply because it wasn't the kind of thing that would be welcome in his circles. Besides, she was convenient for him, no children, no demands, nothing too much for the time being. And suddenly with such a strange request. The dinner was spoiled by a scandal and his wife's tears. A little hypocritical, to be honest. Jason had promised not to go to the negotiations and to stay home with her tomorrow. "I'll try to reschedule, but if it doesn't work out and the deal doesn't get done, I don't know what will happen to our family," he said seriously. The rescheduling was successful. But Emily could not be happy about it either, because their relationship with her husband after the fait accompli became even worse. "Do you realize that you ruined everything I was striving for? You just wanted to hurt me. Did you succeed? Congratulations. I'm glad I have such a wife to help me in all my endeavors. I had the misfortune to get involved with you," Jason shouted. Emily was crying sincerely now. She realized that after what had happened, the divorce was unavoidable. And the instigator of all this, that is, the mother-in-law, apparently satisfied with what had been accomplished, didn't even call, probably quietly rejoicing that she'd gotten what she wanted. Emily said nothing to her husband about acting on her mother-in-law's request. So Barbara Smith was left out, and Jason had every right to blame his wife, who didn't quite understand what had happened. Whether she had saved her spouse or ruined some important deal. Barbara Smith wasn't answering her calls either. Emily realized that most likely the mother-in-law in such a cunning way decided to divorce them from her husband. Indeed, she had been unhappy with his marriage for a long time, and now she had set up her daughter-in-law in such a sly way. Emily could only share her grief with Jennifer, whose friend she had fallen out with when her misfortunes fell upon her. "Do you have any idea what my beloved mother-in-law has gotten up to? Now we're definitely going to get divorced because of me. I'll even remain in Jason's memory just some crazy person who inexplicably messed up all his plans," she revealed. "Emily, I don't think you're quite right," Jennifer said. She was very intelligent and educated, and therefore immediately sensed that things were not at all as Emily presented them. "Your mother-in-law may very well be a bitch, as some mothers-in-law are. But honestly, I think this time she really wanted to save her son from some kind of trouble. I don't know what kind of investors they are, but if I were you, I'd keep a close eye on them and find out what's up. What good am I saying? Emily was surprised. There's a lot out there and I have no idea who they are myself. Well, Barbara Smith promised you stay home, but remember, you've always been a smart woman. You know things. You've got an education, you've got some experience. If I were you, I'd go see those investors if they're still around. So what? What am I going to tell them when I get there? Emily didn't understand. Just tell them that it's not Jason's fault at all. I mean, the main thing is to get the conversation, the meeting, and then you decide what kind of people they are. Sitting around crying is not an option. So you will not get anything but a divorce. Realizing that her friend advises something useful, Emily decided to go to the meeting. She was lucky. First, because she caught these investors, and if she had come a few hours later, they would have gone abroad. And secondly, she was accepted when she told them what she was doing. But that was the end of her luck, because she was admitted only to express her dissatisfaction with her husband's behavior. The investor himself, seemingly a foreigner but speaking pure Russian, without an accent, attacked her with reproaches. I don't know what you want to achieve, but I can tell you one thing: your husband refused quite voluntarily from the help we wanted to give him. He has let us down, and now he has nothing to rely on. It's good that you're trying to protect your family, but you should have thought of that before. There's nothing we can do now. We'll be leaving soon. So no one will want to deal with your husband anymore. But I wanted to make it clear, it's not his fault. It's kind of my fault, Emily said, realizing that she was not going to be able to persuade these cold-eyed people. When she realized that, she said goodbye and walked out into the street in total confusion. Now her marriage was in serious jeopardy, and she could hardly get out of it. Emily was about to cry when one of the investors, the youngest, caught up with her. "Wait, girl," he said. "I wanted to talk to you. My name is Brandon Jones, and your words moved me." "Are you Russian?" she shared. "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, everyone there is Russian. And this major investor, it's just that he went abroad a long time ago. He lives and works there. Let's go to a cafe. But we can't talk on the street." At the cafe, Brandon explained that he wasn't a foreigner, he wasn't a businessman, he'd just been hired by this investor. And what he wanted to offer Jason was a rather odd proposition. He was going to invest a rather large sum of money in his firm, and he was going to do it for free. Why? I don't know how much I know about this stuff. It would have been a waste of money. So your husband would have benefited, but Chief Sergei Nikolaevich would have gotten nothing. Well, I think so. I thought he was related to your husband. But then why did he give up his benefit so easily and ruin relations with him? I don't understand it myself. Emily shook her head. But if everything is as you say, then I really let my husband down. They said goodbye without realizing what had happened, and exchanged phone numbers to notify each other in case there was any new information about the case. Emily didn't want to stay in the dark and decided to find out why her mother-in-law had asked her to talk her husband out of the negotiations. Could it really not be that Barbara Smith wanted to divorce them? The only way to find out was to talk to her husband's mother. Emily decided to find out by all means. She went to her mother-in-law's house. At home, she opened the door to her daughter-in-law and looked rather confused. Emily began at once, without preamble. "Barbara Smith, I didn't tell Jason that I was acting on your request, but please tell me what the point was. You wanted us to have a serious fight, and you succeeded? But your son lost a substantial investment in his business. Why would you do that?" "Come on, Emily. I didn't want you to fight. But what kind of mother wants her son to get a divorce? And I really hope it doesn't happen," Barbara said hurriedly. Emily realized from the hurry and the running eyes that her mother-in-law was lying and told her so. "I don't believe you. You clearly have another agenda, and I want to know what it is." Emily's cold tone must have had an effect on Barbara Smith. She obviously did not want to tell the real reason for her request, but she could not remain silent, so she began her story quite seriously. "All right, I'll tell you the truth, but I hope it stays between us. You can tell Jason that I asked you to talk him out of negotiating, but what you're about to find out is a secret to him. This so-called investor is his biological father. No, we weren't having an affair, and we hardly even knew each other. I agreed to be a surrogate. He didn't have a wife or children for some reason. So he decided to become a father this way. What was it? I was young and very needy. I didn't fully realize how difficult it would be to do what I was offered, and my situation was desperate. Times were hard. My mom was sick, and he offered good money. You could see that Barbara Smith was having a hard time remembering that difficult time. So, did he refuse to take the baby Jason when he was born? Emily asked sympathetically. No, on the contrary. I realized I couldn't give up my son, so I ran away. I'd already taken the money. I mean, not all of it, just the deposit. I ran away because I found out he was going to emigrate. So I'll never see my child again. Before that, I had hoped that I could be there for him, at least as a nanny. When I realized that this father was going to leave and take the baby away, I ran away. I tried not to let him find me. But he wanted to see Jason, raise him. After all, he is his son. He wanted to find him, but he couldn't. Luckily, he had to leave already. He couldn't keep looking for him much longer. And now, after many years, he's found him and he's trying to get close to my son. Found a way to do it, invited him to these negotiations, seduced him with some benefits. But then why did you prevent it? Emily exclaimed. As far as I knew, Jason was really going to get a favorable offer. How could I not? I found out that the man was involved in crime. And I was afraid for Jason that he'd drag him into his business. And then he'd go away and stay kind of out of the picture. But even if that doesn't happen, he could take his son overseas. And then I doubt you and I will ever see Jason again. Or you'll find another husband, and all. After this difficult explanation, Emily felt some sympathy and respect for the woman who was trying to keep her son out of trouble. What she didn't realize was that Barbara Smith had other motives. She'd always disliked Emily, always wished she'd divorced Jason. And now she had even more reason to want that, because her sister-in-law was in on her biggest secret. So somehow she had to get her out of the way. Or had Barbara Smith decided to talk to her son? The relationship certainly hadn't been great lately. But now that he'd had a fight with his wife at the most opportune moment to bond with his mother, she'd called Jason, summoning him to talk. I heard you had a fight with Emily, son. Think about getting a divorce. It's your business, of course, she began gently. The son flared up. Mom, you have no idea what a mean thing she's done to me. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to beat her up. It was a miracle. I can't imagine what was in that empty head of hers when she did that. Son, I'm sorry. I was the one who asked her to talk you out of going to that negotiation. I had a reason. Imagine I found out she was or still is involved with one of those investors. Nothing serious. She seems to love you, but a relationship with another man is still taking place. That's why I wanted you two not to see each other. I was just afraid you'd get some serious emotional trauma instead of benefits. Who knows what this lover is up to? Jason listened to his mother with his mouth open. He hadn't expected this at all. It was much worse than he'd expected. When he came to his senses, he pounded his fist furiously on the table. Thank you, Mom. I don't understand why you hid it before. I didn't want to upset you, ruin the marriage. But it seems to have been ruined long ago, and not by me. You should have known better than to stay away from that lying bitch. Mom, don't jump to conclusions. I beg you. Barbara Smith folded her arms, realizing she'd already achieved her goal. Don't worry, I haven't done anything wrong, but I'm not going to continue. Just congratulate me this minute. I'm a free man, and I don't listen to what my mother says. He walked out of her apartment. Barbara Smith's face lit up with a thin smile. Jason came home and immediately announced to his wife that he was going to separate from her. Get out of this house right now and don't make it a sin. I've never hit a woman before, but I think I'm ready to do it. What's the matter? What's the matter? Emily mumbled fearfully as she sat at her laptop. Is that what you're asking? Because of your entertainment, you ruined our marriage? And now, I don't want to see you and I can't, because every time I see you, I want to strangle you. Get out of my house, you poisonous snake. He grabbed the laptop and smashed it against the wall. That's enough. You've been living off me and cheating on me like this. Get out and leave all the cards, all the money. Let your lovers keep you. I understand you don't choose men who are poor." He wouldn't let Emily get a word in edgewise, and she realized now she really should leave. Staying around Jason was just too dangerous. Emily left the house quickly, without even thinking about grabbing some necessities, and stopped at the nearest intersection in utter confusion. Evening was approaching and she simply had nowhere to go. She didn't think to turn to her mother-in-law, realizing that her son's mood had taken a toll on her as well. There was only her only friend, Jennifer, to whom Emily went. Jennifer, of course, calmed her down, gave her tea, but she couldn't leave her even for the night. "You see, my parents are here. I literally don't have a single bed. But I'll give you some money. You'll pay me back when you can. In the meantime, rent a room, for example, at the grandmother in the neighborhood lives." On the way to this neighbor, Jennifer told that Nadezhda Ivanovna is a very kind but unhappy person. Her only daughter and her husband died a few years ago. Some kind of car accident. She has a grandson, Hank. He's about 10 years old now. Grandma's raising him all by herself. I'm sure she'll let you stay and then we'll figure something out. And don't forget, in a divorce, you get half of everything you bought during the marriage, including the living space. There's no law against kicking your wife out. Emily did not want to sue her husband, hoping that, having calmed down, still agree to an amicable divorce. In a small, cramped apartment, she met the owner and her grandson. They were quiet, calm, and very sad people. Emily's heart clenched with sympathy for both the old woman and the little boy. What were her troubles worth compared to the grief that had happened in the lives of these people? Dorothy Johnson had no objection to Emily staying with her. "I'd let you stay for free, but I need the money," she explained. "Our pensions are small, but we have all sorts of needs." He had to buy a laptop for his studies. It's expensive, not to mention the daily needs. Plus, I still need my medication. Emily was very grateful to the poor woman, promising to help her in any way she could. She also befriended Hank, who let her work on his laptop. "Don't worry, Hank. I won't break it. And I'll work when you don't need it. At night, for example," she promised. "I only use it for studying. And I don't like toys. I like books better," said the boy. Emily was very grateful and decided that with her first earnings she would buy him something he needed the most. In addition, she helped with the lessons and quickly felt that she had become part of this small, underprivileged family. Dorothy Johnson and Hank had become really close to her, not Jason and his mother, who could be expected to do anything. After a few days, she didn't think about them anymore. Jason didn't think much of Emily either. The issue of divorce was settled, but he wanted to cause his ex-wife as much trouble as possible. But how could he do that? He didn't even know where she was hiding. And besides, she wasn't officially employed. Jason decided it was best to go through her lover, so he went to the investors to find out how to deal with them. He didn't consult with his mother, but decided to tell her what he thought about their supposed help. He came with the idea of making a scandal, but everything turned out quite differently. Sergei Nikolaevich stopped all of Jason's angry speeches and said that he had completely different plans. "There's a lot you don't know, but now it's time to reveal all the secrets," he said. And that's when Jason heard that the main investor was his own father. Not surprisingly, this news made the young businessman completely forget about his wife and even his mother. That is, now he saw the enemy not only in Emily, but also in Barbara Smith. How could she hide it, depriving him of a life with his father? After all, he could have lived in a very different environment from birth. But no, she chose the path of a single mother, condemned him to a less than cheerful childhood, and hid the secret of his birth until the very end. What was that if not selfishness? "I'll make up for it now," Jason thought. "I've got all these opportunities open to me." He was sure that now he could sell his not very successful firm and move abroad with his father. Or he could start a new business, a much more profitable one. After all, his own man would support him. He will now have another wealth, fame, a beautiful wife, a luxury villa with a swimming pool. Life in the new homeland can be forgotten, as well as about all the people he will leave here. And how was Jason to know that his parent had no paternal feelings for him? He'd never thought of taking Jason with him and helping him with anything. Yes, he realized that Jason was his own son, and maybe if they'd been together originally, things would have turned out differently. But now they were adults, complete strangers to each other. And more than that, this son became unpleasant to him with his greed. The ease with which Jason had abandoned his own mother betrayed Ace, who had lived all his life, would also easily betray and frame me in case of anything, thought Michael Smith, and therefore decided not to change his intentions to give him money not so big, but in return to take everything. Jason didn't even realize it. How could he know how dark the plans of the man he already called father were? The young man thought it was easy to think that kinship was worth something. And this one had forgotten his kinship to Barbara Smith and had accused his mother of stealing his father away from him. Of course, Emily knew nothing of this either. The lives of the members of the former family did not interest her much. She was happy to see a completely different life from her old one. She was no longer working out of boredom, but working to earn money to help Dorothy Johnson, and sometimes brought some joy and some sadness. She felt that for the first time she was living the life she wanted, always surrounded by people who loved her and cared for them. One day she noticed that Dorothy Johnson was becoming increasingly sad and preoccupied. Some sad thoughts were eating away at her. In the evening, when Hank was already asleep, Emily, sitting in the kitchen with her evening tea, asked if something had happened. "Oh, it had happened," the older woman sighed. "I had a checkup. I found out that I am very seriously ill, and I don't think I have long to live." And Dorothy Johnson wept uncontrollably. Emily tried to comfort her. "But you see, it's not death I'm afraid of," said Dorothy Johnson. "My own life hasn't meant much to me for a long time. But if I die, I'll die. No one can escape it. And maybe I'll meet my deceased dear ones, my parents, my husband, my daughter Annie. And I'm crying that I won't have time to raise him. I'll leave him an orphan. What's in store for him? An orphanage." "But it is possible, probably somehow to cure," said Emily, confused. "There are all kinds of modern methods." "There are. I mean, who's going to take care of me, the old one? There's no money for surgery." "Well, they are given first of all to the young, able-bodied. I got on the waiting list, and they said I'd have to wait a long time. And for me, there can't be any debt. And wait, I wanted to tell you something. I see you're a good, kind woman, and Hank loves you. So here's what I'd like to ask you. While I'm alive, I'll get custody of the boy, and in return, I'll give you this apartment. That's all I got. I trust you. You're not going to leave Hank? You won't cheat?" Emily listened with her hand over her mouth to keep from crying out loud. She felt so sorry for Dorothy Johnson, who seemed resigned to her imminent departure. To somehow comfort her, she agreed to the proposal. She realized that the person was in utter despair, but agreed not just for nothing, but on the condition that Dorothy Johnson immediately after all the paperwork is still go to the hospital and try to get treatment. "We need to take every opportunity that you can to just take your medication now. Apparently, it's too little too late." "Oh, okay. If I feel good about my grandson, why don't I just go? Even if it won't do any good, it's probably better to die in the hospital, even though it won't scare you," was all she said. Emily, meanwhile, had worked up the courage to ask for some help. Dorothy Johnson, after all, if there is a cure and the only snag is money, why not use it? Yes, we must try to get the money, though there wasn't much hope. She decided to make the most of the opportunity. Well, how else could she do otherwise? All the paperwork was in place. Emily became Hank's legal guardian, and Dorothy Johnson was admitted to the hospital. The doctors weren't promising anything good. If surgery could be done, the situation would probably improve. But one waits a long time for someone. You don't have money, as I understand, unless you announce a collection. In some cases, it helps the doctor try to reassure her. But some kind of collection. Emily had scoured the internet and knew how hard it was to raise money, even for children. For her grandmother, though, she wasn't about to announce anything. She decided to approach William Thompson, the same investor's assistant. The success of this idea was doubtful, but still, she couldn't bear to look into Hank's eyes every time he asked anxiously, "Auntie, when Grandma gets discharged, will she be all right? I feel good with you, of course, but it's bad without Grandma. I would like us all to be together." It was difficult to deceive, because the boy felt that everything was bad with his grandmother. But it wasn't right to tell the truth either. Emily had her own truth that she believed in. "I hope we'll be together too, and more than that, I hope there is a way that can save Dorothy Johnson. I love her, too, and this will help. I don't want Grandma to die like Mom and Dad did. Please help me. Let her live a little longer. She promised she'd be with me until I grew up. And I haven't grown up. Don't worry, I'll think of something. And so, while she was building up her resolve and devising a speech to make to William, he called unexpectedly. I'm sorry, Emily, this may be a bad time, but I have some bad news regarding your husband, Jason. The fact is, he's in danger. It seems he's gotten himself into some bad business. William Thompson, how glad I am to receive your call. I've been wanting to call you myself for days now. No, not about Jason. To be honest, I have no interest in his fate at all. We're separated, and hopefully we'll be divorced soon. But that doesn't matter. I wanted to ask you for something else. She, muddling her words because she hadn't had time to prepare, talked about her new family, about the orphan boy who might also lose his beloved grandmother, because they had no money. You see, I really want to help them save Dorothy Johnson. She's not well. And I don't have any money, or even any acquaintances to borrow it from. So I thought of you, but I didn't dare call every day. I thought it was a waste, of course. Somewhat puzzled, said William. I can't give you an answer right now. You'll have to excuse me, but let me call you back in a few hours today. Don't hesitate, I'll be sure to call you back. And you really don't want to know anything about your husband. I'm sorry, but no. Don't think I'm heartless, leaving a loved one in distress, but we stopped being related a long time ago. Yes, as it happens. He kicked me out of the house himself. I doubt he'd even want to talk to me if I called to warn him of mortal danger. He wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was just trying to make up with him. And that's not true at all. There's nothing left between us for a long time. William Thompson apologized and again promised to call back soon. The conversation broke up. Emily didn't really believe him, figuring it was just awkward to say no right away. To agree to give such a substantial sum to a stranger, in fact, a man, and even without any guarantees. How many people would dare to do such a thing? How many will believe in a tearful story about an orphan boy and a sick grandmother? I told them in advance that I can provide all the documents about the disease, maybe even introduce them to Dorothy Johnson. Though that probably wouldn't have helped much. What did he care about them? And Emily too. She's good enough in his eyes. Like a decent man, he wanted to warn her of Jason's danger. And she did. Okay, we're done. I don't care about him. I've got other things to worry about. Give me some money. There's no one to support me. It's silly to hope for any help after that, Emily thought. She realized that her last hope was lost, but she was wrong. William thought nothing bad of her, and he believed the story she told him. He knew that all sorts of things happen in life, and the fact that Emily had separated from her husband pleased him. The thing is that he liked this woman at first sight, maybe even more than he liked her. Yes, he had Emily's cell phone, and sometimes William wanted to call, just to talk or sit in a cafe, like then, but with a different topic of conversation. But could he call, invite her? After all, she was married, and to all appearances in love with this man. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so eager to justify her Jason to the investor. She wouldn't have agreed to a date with another man. She would have been more offended at the suggestion. So he had only called because of the danger that was looming. It was after William had learned that Jason had somehow still developed a relationship with a wealthy foreigner of Russian descent. And that relationship could lead to big problems. It was useless to talk to Jason about it. He would hardly believe it. That was why William had called Emily, not knowing that they had been strangers for months. Besides, it was an excuse to hear once again the voice of the woman he'd grown so fond of. He wanted what was best for her, even if it was with another man. Because any trouble for Jason would have hit Emily. But he'd learned that it wasn't her husband who had gotten her into trouble, and he took her request quite seriously. It was in her nature to help people in desperate situations. Who else but she could do it? And yet, despite his faith in a woman he had seen once in his life and hardly knew, William thought, I have the money, and I have no pity to spend it for a good cause if he was sure it was a good cause. But he couldn't insult Emily by mistrusting her, especially since he trusted her. In short, William was confused, so he decided he would give her the money. But not for nothing. It was embarrassing to look like such a gullible person in front of Emily. Besides, he was afraid to express his feelings for her. So when he called an hour later, he offered, "I'll give you the money, but it's against Dorothy Johnson's apartment. I don't want you to think I don't trust you at all. It's just that, it's a lot of money." "I understand," she exclaimed. "And I didn't think you'd give it to me so easily. I don't know when we'll be able to pay it all, but we'll pay it all, but we'll pay it every month. I don't even know what the exact number is yet. We'll have to talk about that. And you don't think you're going to lose your house. It's just a safety net. I understand. I'm willing to provide all the paperwork. I mean, we can even go to the hospital, talk to the doctor to make sure it's not a scam. And you don't have to put the money in my hands. It's better to deposit it to pay for the surgery." William's face flushed with an agonizing blush of shame. How could he not believe it? Why had he even brought up this bail? And how could he confess his feelings after such a thing? And after all, he was going to talk about it, even though they barely knew each other. He already realized that it was not in vain that he had been thinking about it from time to time for months. As a result, Dorothy Johnson was saved. She had undergone a successful operation. She was on the mend, though she didn't know why. I mean, she knew it was Emily, and somehow she'd found the money. But she reassured her that there was nothing to worry about. Honestly, Dorothy Johnson. It wasn't that hard to get the money. Besides, I'm sure I should be thanking you myself, Emily said. "What for?" "I don't understand," said Dorothy. "Grandma, I'll tell you all about it sometime. You'll be fully recovered first," said Emily. But because her eyes were shining with happiness, Dorothy Johnson understood that in the personal life of her savior is going to change. And Emily was also sure that if it weren't for having to fight for someone's life, Annie and William would hardly ever have met. It was possible that this was indeed the case. Participation in the fate of essentially strangers made an impression on the young man, and the declaration of love between them came after a time, and William proposed. "Yes, I would accept." "Well, more precisely, I agree. But my divorce isn't finalized yet," Emily said, confused. "And I can't find Jason. He won't answer his cell phone. I mean, his phone is always off. As I understand it, he's abroad with that investor. And if that's true, his future doesn't look good," William frowned. "Toodle-oo. You don't do business with those overseas investors anymore." Emily was worried. "No, of course not. I didn't. It's just that they hired me for a short period of time, which was already over. I didn't renew my contract. I realized I shouldn't get involved with people like that." "I see. I hope Jason will be all right," Emily said. "After all, we're getting a clean divorce." It had been a divorce in absentia, since Jason had gotten himself into court after getting involved in a criminal case. Olga wasn't particularly concerned about his fate. The only thing that touched her was the further life of Barbara Smith. Relations with the former mother-in-law were never related. Still, the lonely old woman's situation was unenviable. After all, Jason had been her only son. And now she was alone. Emily didn't think she could help her, but she called to see how she was doing. Maybe some encouragement? Somehow she seemed to be the only relative, maybe the only person sympathetic to Barbara Smith. Her ex-mother-in-law was certainly not a pleasant person, and Emily knew that she'd long since soured relations with her neighbors. She imagined her mother-in-law crying alone in an empty apartment, so she decided to dial her number. "Barbara Smith, I hear Jason's in a very difficult situation," Emily thought, but her mother-in-law didn't let her finish. In response, Emily heard her cursing so loudly that the question of further communication fell away. "Are you happy? Now that you're rid of my son, don't think you'll get anything. Everything in his house is mine. And you insolent predator, you'll find someone else and you'll take him and put him in jail." Barbara shouted. Emily, sighing, hung up the phone. There was nothing more to say. And she wanted to offer at least moral help, but apparently her ex-husband's mother did not need it. However, soon through mutual acquaintances, Emily learned that it was not worth worrying about the future of her mother-in-law. She wasn't alone for long. Soon after her son left, Barbara met a man, and there were changes in her personal life as well. Emily only grinned when she heard about it. It was possible that this union would lead to new disappointments, but it had nothing to do with her. Dorothy Johnson, on the other hand, had been released from the hospital and had mostly recovered from her surgery. She was worried when she heard that Emily was getting married. "Emily, I'm so happy for you. But tell me what's going to happen to us now, me and Hank. You're going to have a family of your own. Maybe babies? You're going to leave us, aren't you?" she asked sadly. "What are you, Dorothy Johnson? There's no way I'm leaving you. We're going to live together. I'm Hank's guardian. I'm supposed to take care of him. And I can't go on without him. I don't think he wants to leave me either. Am I going to have kids or not? Hank will stay with me. And he'll stay with you. He's your family. I can't keep you two apart. And I love you too. And don't worry about the apartment, it's still yours." That was the truth. Emily, right after William proposed to her, asked him where he was going to live. "I understand you have business abroad. I'm not quite ready to leave. I'm not really ready." "Oh, really, Emily?" said her fiancé. "I've never lived abroad, only worked. Now, as I said, all my business there is finished. So you can rest easy. I'm staying here." And that suited Emily. She didn't want to leave her homeland and all of Dorothy Johnson and Hank. And for herself, she really didn't want to leave, so she was very happy that William had decided to stay. A rich man sheltered a shivering beggar, and when at night he heard the melody of a lullaby. "Daddy, I got first place," said Mealy. Andrew smiled. It was his daughter. For 15 years of her life, she had given her father many reasons to be proud of herself. And now the girl called her parent to inform about another victory. She was in New York on another Olympiad for young programmers. Mealy went there as part of a group from the Center for Gifted Children, where she had been studying for 4 years. "My smart girl, congratulations," said the man. "I owe you a present." "I'm so glad." Mealy's voice trembled with excitement. This contest was very important to her. It had been about 5 years since Mealy had decided on her profession. She would be a programmer and would definitely go to Stanford to study. There are so many opportunities for young professionals there, not like in their provincial town. Mealy was already getting crowded. But to get into such a prestigious university, you need to win national and international competitions. So Mealy was doing her best. "Rest now," encouraged his daughter Andrew. "Walk around New York, since you are in such a beautiful city. But be careful there." "Yes, Daddy, of course. I love you." Mealy pressed the reset button. A short beep sounded in the phone. Andrew smiled again. Mealy is so smart, intelligent, sensible, far more savvy than he is. At her age, her daughter will achieve a lot. Oh my. And some 9 or 10 years ago, Andrew was looking for information about schools for children with mental retardation. Everything was going to give her to the first grade of the correctional institution, in a normal school, and certainly in the gymnasium or lyceum would not take her, because in his 6 years the girl did not speak a word, mooing. Sometimes she explained something with gestures if she needed something urgently, but this rarely happened. Most often the daughter was in her own thoughts, sitting on the windowsill in the nursery. It was her favorite place, looking out the window and thinking about something. Mealy hardly smiled at that time. Andrew did not immediately notice that something was wrong with his daughter. He was too busy with his own grief. And Mealy? Well, what could Mealy understand then? She was only 2 years old. She probably didn't even remember Leanie, her mother. That's what Andrew thought. But the disappearance of her mother from the life of a 2-year-old baby still caused a serious trauma to the little girl. It turned out later. The consequences were catastrophic. Every time Mealy achieved another success, Andrew rejoiced and saddened at the same time. Rejoiced. It is understandable why. Sadness, on the other hand, was due to Leanie not seeing it all. She would have been happy to know that her favorite, long-awaited daughter was growing up to be such a smart girl. But that's just the way it turned out. Andrew grew up in a wealthy family and was an only child. Moreover, even at the grandparents, he turned out to be the only grandchild. It is not difficult to assume that from an early age Andrew bathed in love, recognition, and attention of loved ones. He had everything he needed for happiness: beautiful clothes, expensive toys. He was taken to expensive resorts. Delicious pancakes and fragrant pies were prepared for him on demand. Andrew received detailed answers to all his questions and at any time could play with one of his relatives, for example, in board or mobile games. He was never refused. His relatives adored Andrew. and he reciprocated them. It is a blessing to have such a strong, friendly family, where everyone is ready to support the other in any situation. When Andrew became older, he had to study a lot in a prestigious private school. A lot of lessons were assigned, and additionally the boy was engaged in several sections: swimming, boxing, financial literacy, business school, all because he was to become the heir to the family business. So parents called the network of pizzerias, the owners of which were. Business steadily brought good profits and grew, developed. Even branches in other cities opened. Andrew, since childhood, delved into the wisdom of family business. His father often took him with him to the office, showed his very young son financial documents. In general, his father was actively preparing his replacement. "There's not much that can happen to me. You must be ready at any moment to be at the helm," he said. However, immediately added, "But I hope, of course, for a long time to remain a leader. And in any case, I need a worthy assistant. Very soon you will become my right hand." Andrew didn't mind. He liked his father's business, liked to get into the nuances of his business. And the young guy sometimes had quite worthwhile ideas, which his father praised very much and put into practice. Andrew was a great pleasure to see the eyes of his parents light up with pride for his only son. Then Andrew went to study in Moscow, entered the economics department of a prestigious university. Not entirely independently, his father connected some of his connections, but Andrew studied completely independently and was one of the best students of the course. Metropolitan life fascinated the guy. It was bright, rich, diverse, full of adventures and new acquaintances. But Moscow was also tiring as a metropolis. It's good to come here to have fun, to get new impressions. But it's also great to study here, of course. Where else to find such a cluster of talented teachers, theoreticians, and practitioners who have achieved dizzying success? Thought Andrew. But by the last course he realized that his destiny life in his native small town. In Yumatov, quiet, calm, cozy. There is no such a rush there. The road to the office takes a maximum of 20 minutes, and that's if you get into a traffic jam. And in general, there is a special atmosphere in my hometown. It gives me strength and confidence. In general, Andrew himself decided to return to Yumatov. All the more his father needed a right hand. But he knew that if he wanted to stay in Moscow, his parents would not have pressured and did not oppose. They would have supported their son in any case. And it's just wonderful to have such a reliable rear behind him. Andrew came to Yumatov and got to work. Together with his father, they thought over a new project, the opening of a Japanese restaurant. This business was to become a new step in the development of the family business. Prospects were pleasing, plans were inspiring. It seemed that a cloudless future was ahead. In the end, everything with the restaurant of Japanese cuisine turned out, but not immediately, but after almost 5 years. For a while, the project had to be forgotten, as important events began to happen one after another in Andrei's life. And then later, this restaurant practically saved a man's life, distracted him, shifted his attention, and helped him get away from destructive thoughts. But that was later. Anyway, one fine December day, Andrei decided that it was time for him to unwind. He called his former classmate Alexei, and the friends went to the skating rink, just like in the good old days. The skating rink was large, located on the central square of the city. The music was playing loudly, and people of all ages and builds were sliding smoothly on the ice. Snow was falling from the sky in large flakes. In the center of the rink stood a 3-meter-tall Christmas tree. Soon New Year's Eve, Andrei's favorite holiday since childhood. Until now, his parents made him a sweet gift, collected in a beautiful package with Santa Claus' favorite candies of their already 25-year-old son. Andrei was sincerely pleased with this surprise every time. He felt so warm at heart, and memories of his happy childhood came back to his mind at once. Andrei was confident on skates. In childhood, he and Alexei managed to go to the hockey section for 2 years. Then both of them had no time for sports. They started serious studies, but their skills haven't gone anywhere. Here he is, Alexei already at the other end of the rink with girls trying to get acquainted. Andrei grinned. Yes, his buddy will not miss a single beauty. Such a guy won't be missed anywhere. Andrei looked at his friend and therefore probably did not immediately notice her, a girl in a white down jacket and light jeans, so fragile, almost transparent. And he, a big guy, ran at her and of course knocked her down. Ouch. The young people exclaimed at the same time. Andrei suddenly felt his cheeks flooding with paint. He had pushed a man. The guy hastily gave the stranger his hand, helping her up. "Sorry, please, it's my fault." "Are you hurt?" he babbled, looking into her marvelous blue eyes. "No, I'm all right." The girl waved her hand. "I was looking around and didn't notice you driving." Andrew could not believe his ears. She apologized. Miracles and only. It would be more logical to hear outraged exclamations from the girl. "I'm sorry, I've only recently gotten on skates. Anyway, I don't know how to skate. That's why I'm bumping into everyone." "But instead," Evie said, "I'm the one who hit you." Andrew looked into the girl's wide-open blue eyes and realized that he did not want to let go of her hand. Although the interlocutor has long stood firmly on her feet, and in his help obviously no longer needed, long brown strands of hair stood out from under her white down jacket. The girl's cheeks were bright pink from the frost. She looked so beautiful, so young, so touching, that the boy couldn't take his eyes off her. "Maybe if you don't mind, I could give you a lesson. Teach you how to skate." "You'd better stay on the ice," Andrew suggested. "That would be great. I never dreamed of having a personal trainer. But that's exactly what I need today," Evie smiled. That's how Andrew met his future wife. Only then, of course, he did not know about it yet. He didn't even think about it, just enjoyed talking to a beautiful girl. Looking like snow maidens in their white jackets, they took a long ride. Matthew had long since left the rink. Andrew and Evie still didn't want to part. They talked about all sorts of things that day, as if they had known each other for 100 years. Andrew was surprised at how much they coincided in everything. Of course, the young people exchanged phone numbers and started dating. Andrew knew about his father's plans for his personal life. The parent wanted his son to marry Mealy, the daughter of a local entrepreneur and business partner. Then the financial gatekeepers would merge their empires into something grand. Mealy was quite a nice girl. The same age as Andrew, serious, career-oriented. She was also preparing to become her father's right-hand woman. Andrew was even initially not against becoming her spouse. Why not? A worthy option. But meeting Evie put an end to all those plans. Evie was from a middle class or even poor family. It was a fine line. Evie lived with her parents and two younger brothers in a two-room apartment. They didn't starve. They didn't wear rags. Evie had even graduated from the local university. But the family couldn't afford much. For example, they never traveled or dined in restaurants. That is, the financial levels of Evie and Andrew were very different. The girl was a little embarrassed by this, but the guy didn't care. He dreamed of showing Evie the whole world, to make her life bright, happy, and carefree. Andrew truly fell in love and felt that it was mutual. The guy realized that his parents would not be thrilled with this choice. At first, they warned him so many times about girls who dreamed of hooking a boy from a wealthy family, mercantile ladies who planned to move into a beautiful life on the hump of a man in love with them. Andrew knew that such really existed, even met him more than once. But the intentions of such pirate girls were obvious, no matter how much they tried to hide it. And Evie? She was different. Andrew was sure that his mother and father, having gotten to know Evie better, would understand everything and accept his son's choice. And even if not, Andrew was almost indifferent to the opinion of his parents, just to be near his beloved, to see her deep blue eyes, hear her gentle voice and feel how she puts her head on his shoulder. This gesture, for some reason, was particularly endearing to the guy. And so it came to pass. Evie was very afraid to meet Andrew's parents, but it was impossible to postpone. The guy proposed to his beloved, she agreed. No matter how it went, she'd have to meet her new in-laws. The acquaintance went just fine. As Andrew expected, the charming bride won the hearts of his mother and father. It could not be otherwise. Andrew, of course, met with the parents of his future wife and was surprised to note that Evie's father clearly abused alcohol. It was noticeable in his eyes, skin color, trembling hands. The girl's mother looked pale and exhausted. Apparently, she had to carry her entire family on her own. Andrew then sincerely felt sorry for her. Kira did not tell Andrew about his father before, apparently embarrassed. But did she think that his attitude to her because of this will change? How could Kira assume such a thing? In general, Having seen in what conditions live his beloved, Andrew, even stronger, strengthened in the decision to quickly take her away from there, in a new life. Then there was a wedding, lavish, loud, cheerful. Kira, in her wedding dress, resembled a fairy tale princess. Andrew could not take his eyes off her, and he was not the only one. The bride received many compliments from all the guests. True, Kira did not know how to accept them at all. Very embarrassed, although she was pleased. Andrew and Kira began to live in the apartment of her husband. The guy has long since settled in his own home. To his parents came only to visit. Those were wonderful days. Kira was getting used to a new home, to a new life. The newlyweds were learning how to live together. Adult relatives warned that the process of lapping usually does not go as smoothly as we would like. Inevitable conflicts, disputes, quarrels. But in the case of Kira and Andrew, nothing of the kind happened. Young spouses, as if they were created for each other. Andrew every day mentally thanked fate for the fact that she brought him together with Kira. He could not believe that they are so coincidental. They like the same movies and books, the same look at things, even phrases for each other sometimes finish. Kira worked as a notary's assistant in a local office, and Andrew developed a business with his father. Love, mutual understanding, a house full of cups. It seemed that only cloudless happiness awaited the newlyweds ahead. And so it was for some time, about a year after the wedding. Kira informed her husband that she was expecting a child. The joy of the future father had no limit. They had already been planning a baby for 6 months, but it did not work out in any way. The newlyweds were going to the doctors, waiting for Kira's vacation, tuning in for a long, systematic search for the problem. And here it is, happiness. Everything worked out by itself. Pregnancy was not very easy. Kira was constantly nauseated. She went to the hospital every now and then. Closer to the birth, Kira was diagnosed with heart problems. It seemed as if they had not been there before, or they did not manifest themselves. And then the body, coping with the increased load, suddenly gave failure. Andrew's parents found the best doctors for Kira. She was constantly under observation. Andrew was painful to see his beloved in such a state, and from fear for her, he anxiously clenched his heart. Fortunately, everything went safely. In due time, Kira gave birth to a healthy, strong girl. At the family council, it was decided to name the baby girl Evie. Andrew was happy everything was fine with the child. Kira was also on the mend after childbirth, and the recovery of the young mother's body was in full swing, as evidenced by numerous examinations. Kira quickly recovered and happily plunged into taking care of her daughter. Andrew also did not stay aside, tried to fully enjoy the infancy of his long-awaited child. The man realized that the second baby in their family will not be. Doctors made it clear that Kira contraindicated pregnancy and childbirth. She barely survived this time, too. According to the cardiologist, the young woman was just lucky. Andrew was not ready to risk the most expensive thing he has in his life. And one child is enough for them. He is also in the family alone. Evie turned out to be exactly as it should: healthy, smart, cheerful, agile, and quick. As soon as the daughter began to walk, immediately learned to climb into the most unexpected places, then in the closet with clothes her parents found her, or in the toy box. You need to keep an eye on such a prankster. Evie immediately became a favorite of numerous relatives, parents, grandparents. Adults did not want to soul in the girl, often visited her, gave gifts. Andrew's mother was especially pleased with her granddaughter. Finally, there is for whom to buy dresses. And that all these shorts and sneakers are boring already. Sooner the girl's hair would grow back. I want to braid her pigtails. A year and a half passed. Evie was already starting to talk. Kira devoted all her time to her daughter, singing her songs, telling her poems, practicing finger games and gymnastics with the little girl. And the results were evident. The girl in her year and a half quite clearly spoke in sentences, of course, with a childish accent, but adults understood her perfectly. Andrew's heart clenched with tenderness when his little girl addressed him. The word, this miraculously fragile creature with a height of just over 80 centimeters, made him stronger. The man felt that for the sake of his daughter and wife, he could roll mountains. They were so happy. But at least it seemed so to Andrew. However, Kira once very surprised him, saying that she is happy, of course, but still not quite. It turned out that Kira had dreamed of having another child. Evie has grown up, and looking at the little girl, I regret that the girl will have to grow up alone. You see, I have two brothers after all. It's so great. We were never bored. We ran everywhere together, played, talked a lot about everything, stood for each other. But the girl is all alone. That's not good. But I too grew up alone in the family, Andrew objected with a smile. And I had quite a happy childhood. You just don't know what you were deprived of. Kira shook her head and sighed sadly. Andrew felt uneasy. He didn't like this talk. You know it's dangerous for you to give birth again. Remember how hard Evie was on us. You were on the brink so many times. But we didn't know then, and now we do, and we realize it's very dangerous. We've had enough of Evie. That's exactly what we know, Kira exclaimed. And that's why we're going to make a bed. I'll see a cardiologist, I'll take all the right medications. And I'll prepare for pregnancy. I'm already taking the right vitamins. I've read a lot about these cases. If you keep everything under control, the risk is minimal. Kira dreamed of having another child. But Andrew was adamant. They even had their first fight over it. His wife convinced him that everything will be fine. You just need to follow the prescriptions of doctors, constantly observed by specialists, and she is ready for this for the sake of the second baby. However, the man could not risk Kira's life. Of course, he wanted a big family, several children, but not at such a cost. To test fate again, given their recent experience, was foolish. And yet it happened. On a sunny July morning, Kira informed Andrew that they would have a second baby boy. The man was truly terrified then. He probably even turned pale. What's wrong with you? Everything will be fine. You'll see. Kira laughed and put her hand on his shoulder. Andrew only shook his head. He knew, felt that nothing was going to be okay anymore. The pregnancy, oddly enough, was going much easier than the first time. Kira was feeling good, taking lots of walks. She followed all the doctor's recommendations and was examined very often. She literally never left the hospital, although her condition was quite bearable. Everything seemed to be in order, but on the soul of Andrew was uneasy. And for good reason. It happened at night. Suddenly nothing foretold trouble. Andrew woke up from the quiet sounds. Kira was sick, so bad that she couldn't even call for help. Kira was suffocating. Andrew jumped up, turned on the light, and was horrified. He had never seen his wife in such a state. So pale. Black circles under her eyes like a dead man's white skin. Kira's dried lips glistened with sweat. Her chest heaved. The woman was short of breath. Andrew grabbed the phone in a panic and called an ambulance. Then he called his mother to have her and his father come over and sit with Evie. The baby was sleeping sweetly in her princess room and didn't even realize something scary was going on. Andrew held Kira's cold hand, confessed his love to her, asked her to hold on, and prayed. For the first time in his life, he probably prayed to himself that the doctors would make it in time. It seemed to him that when help arrived, it would be too late. And from this thought, Andrew began to panic. But the doctors were in time. Several uniformed men arrived. They went into the bedroom. Kira took a cardiogram, measured her blood pressure. She was listened to, then injected with something. The woman seemed to feel better. At least she was breathing more freely. Andrew exhaled. Everything would be all right now. His parents came over to babysit Evie, so Andrew calmly followed the ambulance to keep an eye on Kira. The man drove through the night city behind the car, in which at the same time medics were fighting for the life of his wife. They should be able to handle it. They're professionals. It's going to be okay. That's what Andrew convinced himself as he drove along. But reaching the hospital, the man learned the terrible news. Kira was not brought. She was gone right in the ambulance. The doctors did everything they could. Pregnancy, which Andrew was so afraid of, still finished his wife. The child could not be saved either. For a while, the man went into himself. He was not interested in anything, neither business, nor his own health, not even a small daughter. He blamed himself for not changing Kira's mind, not forcing her to have an abortion. Of course, he was to blame for everything that had happened. He should have been a more attentive and sensitive husband. He failed, did not save his happiness. Life without Kira made no sense. They had so many plans, so many joint desires. And now what? Andrew felt sorry for himself. Who else will understand him so much as a spouse? Who will love him so much? But even more, the man was sorry for so suddenly, early cut short the young life of his wife. She had not seen all those corners of the planet, which Andrew promised to show her, didn't have time to enjoy life properly. Mother and father tried to pull their son out of the abyss of despair. They brought to him psychotherapists and psychologists who conducted soul-saving conversations with the man. Sometimes it did make things easier, but only for a while. Andrew did not understand why he should live on. The worst thing was that he didn't even want to see Evie. The girl misses you, his mother tried to get through to her son. Not only did her mom die, but her father disappeared from her life. Just imagine what it's like for the child. Andrew didn't want to imagine anything. He didn't care. And anyway, what can a little girl who is not even 2 years old understand? Probably has already forgotten in Kira and me. But her mother insisted that Evie was not well. She doesn't talk to anyone else or smile. Remember how giggly our little girl used to be? Now she sits around all day rearranging cubes. It's a terrible sight. No one can get her to move. What if you can do it? Only 6 months after the tragedy, Andrea began to slowly come back to life. Parents, friends, and doctors helped. And of course Evie too. The man started working again. And then just then his father offered him to develop a long-planned project, a restaurant of Japanese cuisine. Andrew gladly seized the opportunity to distract himself for a while. The project is huge, a lot of work. We'll have to work hard to enter the market. That's good. Let his head be filled with familiar things rather than destructive thoughts. That's when the man came to see his daughter for the first time in a long time. Andrew felt guilty in front of the little girl. It was as if he betrayed her, abandoned her, left her to her parents. After all, the mother is right, Evie has experienced a huge tragedy. And even if she does not realize everything as an adult, but at the level of feelings certainly felt it to the full. Kira and Evie were so close. She followed her mother like a tail, even climbing into her crib. At night, she'd lie at her mother's side. They were never apart for more than a couple hours. And then all of a sudden, Andrew hardly recognized his daughter. Of course, he realized that children grow up fast at that age. When the tragedy happened, Evie was barely 2 years old. How hard it is for Andrew to survive such a tragedy, to lose his beloved wife Kira, and to see the state of his little daughter Evie after this grief. And after 6 months, he finally decided to visit his daughter. And she was already 2.5 years old. The look of her blue eyes, so similar to Kira's eyes, was sad and somehow adult, not childishly serious. Evie had really grown quiet and sad. She didn't run, she didn't laugh, she didn't even smile. She used to be such a talkative little girl, a real giggler. Relatives and friends were surprised at how developed she was for her age. And now the girl said nothing at all, only sometimes mooed something under her nose. This discovery alarmed Andre. The mother explained that it was the consequences of stress, that all the doctors examined Evie. Physically, she is healthy. But the doctors don't really believe that she used to talk so well for her years. They say it'll work out, she'll talk again. Many children her age are still silent. Andre was grateful to his parents for taking care of his child. He himself was in no condition to take care of the baby after losing Kira. Eva is very cute. For us it is even enjoy, they said. Andrew went with his head into work on a new restaurant of Japanese cuisine, Yamato. He put all his efforts into the project, trying to achieve the highest quality. The restaurant opened even ahead of schedule, but Andre wanted more. He dreamed of having guests from all over the city, and even the region. With Evie he now saw, but not often. The girl still lived with her grandparents. Andrew plunged into work with his head, trying to distract himself from the heartache. Andrew's mother did a lot with her granddaughter Evie and took her to specialists. She developed the little girl at home as best she could. But there was no result. Evie grew up, but she never spoke. It was painful for Andrew to see his once cheerful little girl in such a state. It seemed she still hadn't recovered from what had happened with Kira. Andrew, of course, was still worried too. He longed for Kira, blamed himself periodically, and despaired over his inability to hug his loved one. But he was older and stronger. Besides, he had a job in Evie. She could not cope with her misfortune, and the specialists, on which her adult relatives were not stingy, were powerless. Andrew, on the advice of doctors, bought a cozy country house with a large yard. On the territory arranged for Evie a whole fairy tale park with fountains, swings, and even her own little castle, and in the backyard for the baby built a pool. Many doctors said that swimming has a beneficial effect on the nervous system of children. So Andrew took it upon himself to teach his daughter to swim. Evie quickly figured out what to do. Now she did not get out of the pool in the summer days and again from side to side like a fish. But that didn't work either. True, she became more athletic and sturdy, which of course is not bad either. But she was still silent and not particularly eager to interact with the world around her. Andrew was now taking care of his daughter on his own. That was his decision. After all, a daughter was his fatherly responsibility and duty. During the day with Evie sat Nanny, because the little girl could not be given to a regular kindergarten, and in the correctional did not want there are children with serious diagnoses and mental retardation. Evie is not like that. She is very smart. She has lively, intelligent eyes. She just doesn't speak yet. But daycare is voluntary. You can take your child if you want, or you can keep her at home. And Evie's 6 years old. School's just around the corner. If it goes on like this, we'll have to send the little girl to a special school for children with special developmental needs. Andrew dreaded the thought of sending Evie to a special school. He knew his daughter was capable of many things. She sees everything, notices and understands everything, but she is silent. She can't go to a remedial school. It would only make things worse. But the doctors made it clear that there was no other way out. If a year of rehabilitation does not yield results, Evie will be enrolled in a special school, because she must be educated anyway. Evie, will you say a word? Andrew begged his daughter. You can, can't you? I know. The girl looked at her father with indifferent eyes and remained silent, and then went to his room, sat on his favorite wide windowsill, hugged his knees with his hands and thought about something known only to her. She could sit like that for hours. That November evening, Andrew stayed late at the office. He warned Evie's nanny and promised to reward her generously for her overtime hours. She didn't mind. I've had a lot of children, the nanny shook her head. But this is the first time I've met such a quiet and unproblematic. It's a pleasure to sit with the girl. You can't see her, you can't hear her. Andrew, of course, was not pleased with such compliments to his daughter. It would be better if Evie, like other children, asked a million questions a minute and methodically trashed the whole house. But no. Sitting on the windowsill, staring off into the distance. If you call her to dinner, she comes, eats, cleans up the dishes. If you don't call her, she won't remember that it's time to eat. And so it is in everything. No initiative, no desires. Except for the pool in the summer months gave the girl some pleasure. And even there, in the warm water, she did not smile. So Andrew left the office late. It was almost 8 o'clock. On the way, the man remembered that Evie's favorite cereal had run out at home. It would be a pity if she didn't get the usual product for breakfast. No, the little girl wouldn't make a scandal, wouldn't get cranky, and certainly wouldn't get hysterical. Evie probably wouldn't give away her disappointment. In that sense, Evie was indeed a trouble-free child. But Andrew wanted to please his daughter, at least in small things. He carefully noticed what Evie liked and tried to bring her positive emotions more often. Andrew parked near a convenience store and got out of the warm interior of the car. It was slushy, dark, and uncomfortable outside on a cold November evening. His face was immediately blasted by the icy wind. The man lifted the collar of his jacket to protect his neck and cheeks from the merciless gusts and walked briskly toward the supermarket doors. The doors obediently slid to the sides, letting the visitor inside. Andrew found himself on the stairs leading upward. It was much warmer here than outside, but the dim bulb under the ceiling gave little light. The entire floor was covered in dirt that the cleaning lady hadn't had time to clean up yet. Not a very cozy or pleasant place. The man was about to go up to the store when he noticed a girl in a thin coat that was soaked through. She was sitting behind a column on a high curb that stretched along the wall. Andrew stopped. There was something about the girl's appearance that the man immediately realized she was in trouble and needed help. Long blonde hair, disheveled by the wind, thin hands shivering in the deep pockets of her coat, and her eyes huge eyes of a marvelous turquoise hue. Andrew, it seems, had never seen such confused and sad eyes. It was necessary to approach this stranger, to find out what happened, but Andrew did not want to frighten her. After all, he is a man, and she is a fragile young girl, probably anxious and thinking about him unknowingly. So he walked on by. The supermarket was already sparsely populated. Andrew walked slowly through the rows, throwing Evie's favorite cereal, sausage, cheese, some fruit for himself into his basket. Then he saw a beautiful doll that looked a lot like Evie. Andrew smiled and put the pink box with the rest of his purchases. Maybe this toy would make his silent princess happy just a little. All the while he wondered if that girl would still be there when he left the store. The man hoped that the girl would leave, because otherwise he would have to offer her help. Otherwise his conscience would torment him later. Who knows what her story is? I would not want to get involved in anything. But Andrew's hopes were not realized. The girl sat in the same place, wrapping her arms around her shoulders, trying to stop shivering. Apparently she was frozen to the bone in her thin, soaked coat after the recent downpour with hail. Andrew approached her resolutely and, trying to soften her tone as much as possible, asked, "Are you all right?" The girl raised her amazing eyes at him, in which clearly read surprise. But she smiled a very beautiful, sincere, and kind smile. "Yes, of course it's all right." "I think you're not telling the truth," Andrew also smiled and replied. "You see, when people are fine, they don't sit alone in the supermarket, shivering from the cold. Maybe you should call a cab. You obviously need to get home, get warm." "No, I don't have a home. I don't have a home," she admitted with her head down. "How?" Andrew was surprised. She didn't look homeless in any way. She looked well-groomed and not badly dressed. "It's a long story. But everything will be fine with me. I'll think of something now," she assured. After such an admission, Andrew couldn't just walk away. He sat down next to her on the curb and looked into her eyes. "Tell me, I have a lot of time, so I would love to hear your very long story." Andrew felt sorry for this young girl. What if someday his Evie would find herself in a difficult situation? She will need help, and people will pass by indifferently. After all, this girl is someone's daughter, too. Here's what a stranger who identified herself as Stacy told me. "I grew up in a village in a large family. When I was 10 years old, my father died on a construction site, and our family fell on hard times. The head of the family used to provide for us. By village standards, we lived very well, a full cup, our own household. My mother didn't work. She took care of the house and the children. There were 5 of us. I was the eldest. A vegetable garden, chickens, 2 cows, a goat, there was enough to do. And then Mom was left alone with us. At first, it seemed that the family would manage to stay afloat. But soon it became clear nothing would work. There was a catastrophic lack of money. We had to sell livestock, but the proceeds were not enough for long. Mom tried to work, but for some reason she didn't stay anywhere for long. And in the village there was not enough suitable vacancies. And so my mother started to take to the bottle. Apparently, when she got drunk, she forgot about the loss of her loved one, moneylessness, lack of work, and need. We children were left to our own devices. The house was always dirty and uncomfortable now. I, as the eldest, tried to keep order and bring up my younger brothers and sisters. But I was just a child myself. Looking at what was happening, I firmly decided that I didn't want to live like that. I will definitely have a different fate. While my brothers and sisters rejoiced in the freedom that no one controls, does not force to clean or do homework, I studied. I realized that in order to make it in the world, you have to get an education, and for that you have to sweat. I was praised at school, set as an example to my classmates, and there was a reason for that. Everyone knew the conditions in which I lived. And yet I managed to always look clean, tidy, and study only for A's. Toward the end of 9th grade, Stacy decided on her future profession. She decided to become a teacher. The girl was good at getting along with children, especially with little ones. She taught all her younger brothers and sisters to read and write, although they resisted at first. But Stacy managed to find an approach to each one. She also enjoyed watching the children of her neighbors, and not just to make sure that they did not climb anywhere, and taught them useful things, toddlers, colors and shapes, and older letters and numbers. The parents of the children were delighted with the results and paid the clever girl with food and sweets. Everyone said that she would make a wonderful teacher. In fact, the adults encouraged Stacy to think about her future profession. Time flew by, and now Stacy received her high school diploma with only A's. Her teachers helped her apply to teacher training college and helped her get a dormitory. There was no hope for Stacy's mother in this regard. She had lost her way, turning into a likeness of herself. It was obvious to everyone that there was nothing to be done. The younger children had been placed in an orphanage. It was simply too dangerous for them to stay with such a mother. Stacy had at least looked after them, but the girl had to study. She felt sorry for the younger ones, but she realized that they would be better off in the orphanage, where they would at least be fed and sent to school. And what awaited the children at home? Hunger, cold, and dirt. Stacy's life began anew. She took to her studies with gusto, used to studying, learning new things, becoming smarter and more experienced. Soon she became the best student of her course and was held up as an example to her classmates. In the course of her studies, Stacy realized that she liked working with difficult children. It's easy to work with ordinary children, but kids with special needs are more interesting, and the results are very satisfying. That's why Stacy specifically asked for an internship at a remedial school. There she immediately found out that she can find an approach even to the most difficult children. She was in contact with children with very serious diagnoses, to which even experienced specialists could not reach. "You have a gift, no other way," wondered the head of the school. Stacy smiled embarrassedly. She had been modest and shy since she was a child. After graduating from college, Stacy was immediately hired at the very school where she was interning. The salary was small, but it was enough money for food and a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city. Her own place, albeit modest. By then, Stacy's sisters had graduated from the orphanage. One became a seamstress, the other a pastry chef. Both soon married well, and their husbands were from out of town. Of course, they took their wives with them. Stacy was happy for her sisters, and a little surprised that they were younger than she was. Very young, almost children, but already married ladies. Now she could not worry about them. Their destinies would work out well. True, they will not see each other often. They are separated by thousands of kilometers. But this is not the main thing. The sisters have husbands, education, work. Stacy's two younger brothers were adopted by a couple of Hiddings, bright red-haired twins with blue eyes. The boys came to the orphanage as toddlers, just 8 years old. Handsome, bright, smiling, they were quickly taken in by a family from the city. Stacy didn't know where her brothers were now. Adoption was a secret. But in the orphanage she was told that the new parents very good, wealthy people. So the brothers' fate was safe too. Stacy's mother had a tragic story during her college years. During another drinking party, which her mother regularly organized in her empty house, one of the guests fell asleep with a lit cigarette. The wooden building burst into flames like a torch. Some of the guests managed to escape the burning building, but the mother and several others did not escape. Perhaps they were sound asleep and did not notice anything. It is scary to think what would have happened to the siblings if they had not been in the orphanage. So by her 20s, Stacy was pretty much alone in the world. Her mother was gone. Brothers and sisters moved to different corners of the vast country. Not even her own home was left. But Stacy was not discouraged. She had a desirable profession, a favorite job. It was hard, of course, alone, but she could cope. She had her whole life ahead of her. She'd meet her love, and she'd have children. And their apartment will be big and cozy. Stacy would never repeat her mother's fate. And that's how the young girl lived in a rented apartment. She worked, went to movies and attractions with her friends, educated herself, read a lot of additional literature on the education of special children. And then, perhaps, age took its toll. One day Stacy realized that she couldn't and didn't want to be alone anymore. She needed someone near and dear to her who would take care of her, and she would take care of him too. How great it is to fall asleep and wake up next to a loved one, to talk with him on a variety of topics, to support each other, to make plans for the future. Would Max have made such an impression on Stacy if he had met her at another time? Perhaps the girl fell in love with him so sincerely and wholeheartedly only because she was already ready to fall in love, waiting for it. And then the right person came along. Stacy thought about it later, but she'd never thought about it when she'd met Max. She was on her way back from a friend's birthday party. It was evening. Stacy was in a good mood. They'd had a good time, laughed a lot. The girls went to the club to continue the party. Stacy refused. She didn't like those places. Noisy, crowded, cramped. And she didn't have much money left. She'd just have to make it to her next paycheck. Stacy had 2 important appliances out of order this month, a hairdryer and an electric kettle. Unforeseen expenses. Stacy looked lovely that night, knew it. A flowing, beautiful, slim-fitting sundress, loose hair, light makeup. The proof of the girl's attractiveness was the stares she felt on her. It was pleasant, though a little embarrassing. "Girl, you are so beautiful. Can I meet you?" A voice came from the side. Stacy turned around and met Matthew's eyes. She didn't know it was Matthew at the time, of course. She saw a wonderful guy in front of her. Kind, open face, open eyes of a beautiful hazel hue. There was a lot in them, a light, an interest, and admiration. You could drown in those eyes. "So you don't mind if I walk beside you for a while?" The boy looked at Stacy questioningly. No, the girl smiled. She really wanted this stranger to walk her home. But at the same time, Stacy was embarrassed by her own desire. "Fine," the escort dispelled. They walked through the park. Matthew told his new acquaintance jokes, shared some news, asked her questions about her life. He talked about himself, too. Matthew was an easy and pleasant person to talk to, charming, relaxed. He had a good tongue. The young man didn't go out of his way for a word. Stacy was immediately impressed by the sincerity with which he talked about his own life. And she was sincere with him, too. Matthew's honesty implied a reciprocal honesty. It turned out that Matthew and Stacy had a lot in common. Matthew, too, had grown up in the village, and he, too, was the eldest in a large family. Except that he didn't know his father and didn't remember him. He'd asked his mother, of course, but she didn't seem to remember who had given her her firstborn. Stacy's mother had started drinking after her husband died. Matthew's mother had been drinking for as long as he could remember. But Matthew, despite the lack of control and upbringing, still finished 9 grades, because he understood perfectly well without it he would not achieve anything in life, and dreams and ambitions were always present. So having finished 9 grades, the boy went to the city. The average score of the certificate was not too high, but still the boy was taken to the construction technical college. There was a shortage in one of the faculties. It was just luck. Matthew lived with his grandmother during his studies. She'd never been involved in her grandson's life before. She'd cut her failed daughter out of her life. As if at first tried to pull her out of the swamp, but realizing that it was useless, eliminated. But the eldest grandson did not drive away. She welcomed him warmly. She gave him a separate room and even provided him with money at first, until Matthew found a part-time job. The boy started working early. Life made him do it. While still living with his mother in the village, he mowed grass for someone, helped to paste wallpaper, and painted fences for neighbors. The pay was low, but there was enough for bread and milk. Sometimes there was also enough for sweets. If the boy had not taken care of himself, it is not known whether he would have survived or not. Because there was no hope for his mother, she was not interested in anything but the bottle. In the city, there were much more opportunities for part-time work, especially for a hard-working and not afraid of difficulties student of construction college. So many construction sites, and everywhere you need helpers, ready to do low-skilled work. And the pay was pretty good by Matthew's standards. When I was in college, my younger sisters were taken away to an orphanage. Matthew shook his head sadly. Some of the neighbors complained to the guardianship office. And they did the right thing. The girls would have been lost with their mother. I wanted to file a report myself, but I couldn't make up my mind. I thought maybe it was wrong. Matthew continued. I visited the sisters at the orphanage, bringing them candy and coloring books, asking about their lives. The girls told me that everything was fine, but they still missed their mother, despite her attitude towards them. And then one day I came and found out that the girls had been taken away to a family. I never saw them again. Maybe we'll meet again someday. Life is long. Stacy couldn't believe her ears. Matthew's story was exactly like her own. By the way, the guy listening to her story was also surprised and looked at her like she was his own. Even hugged her a few times. And the gesture was so warm, so natural, that Stacy didn't even feel embarrassed. And then my grandmother died, and I ended up on the street, because a lot of relatives got smart and took the apartment for themselves. Neither my mother nor I got anything. It happens. Matthew sighed. Not only did I lose someone I was very attached to, but I had to deal with a lot of domestic problems. I had to make amends. Matthew withstood the next challenge with fortitude and dignity. He got a full-time job because the money from his part-time job would not be enough for rent and groceries. He only had a year of college left. It was a difficult period, hard work on a construction site plus studying at night. I had to scramble to keep up with lectures and keep my job. I was running back and forth like a stung man. I lost weight, I got gaunt. Almost didn't sleep for months before I got my diploma. But I got through it, Matthew said proudly. But now it's just work, he smiled. It's much easier than combining work and study. I can remember that time. Matthew worked, rented an apartment, just living. Everything seemed to be going well for him, given his background. Time flew by as we talked, and now they were at Stacy's house. The girl was getting annoyed. Wow, how fast they'd gotten there. I don't think this is a coincidence, Matthew said seriously. I've only known you for a short time, but I already feel that you're not a stranger to me. Stacy smiled. She felt exactly the same way. Matthew was so understanding, so strong and kind and good. She didn't want to part with him at all. I'll pick you up tomorrow, okay? We'll go for a walk somewhere. I'll show you my favorite places in the city. I'm sure you don't know any of them, Matthew said. So you don't mind? Of course, Stacy didn't mind. The young people exchanged phone numbers and hugged goodbye. Matthew didn't dare to kiss the girl. It happened a little later, during the very first date they had agreed on. An evening of getting to know each other. Stacy couldn't get enough of Matthew. She finally had a boyfriend. And what a guy. His innate talent for making people laugh made him an instant favorite in any company. Matthew knew and could do so many things. And of course he had a lot of friends. They would call him every now and then and ask him to go out. Matthew would tell them that he couldn't because he was out with his girlfriend. Stacy immediately felt very important and significant for the guy, and this feeling filled her heart with warmth. The young people moved in together quickly. Both felt it would be better for both of them. They didn't want to part after their outings anyway. Renting one apartment was much cheaper than renting two. Matthew moved in with Stacy because his apartment was in a remote neighborhood and Stacy's was more convenient to get to work. In the home, Matthew proved to be a homemaker. He could cook dinner, fix a faucet, and wallpaper. No detail escaped his attentive eye. The guy immediately saw the shortcomings and tried to eliminate them. True, during the joint residence some peculiarities became clear. Matthew could not live without his friends. They often called and met somewhere. After these meetings, Matthew always came back drunk, but not too drunk. It scared Stacy. She remembered what had happened to her mother because of her love of alcohol. Matthew's parents were no better. What if he turned out the same way? But the boy only laughed when Stacy shared her worries with him. Don't worry, I won't make the same mistakes as my mother. I've got my mother's example right in front of me. It won't happen to me, he said. Stacy repeatedly asked Matthew to take her with him to his friends, or invite these people to theirs. The girl wanted to meet the people who were important to her lover. But for some reason, Matthew didn't want those meetings. You see, there are only guys out there. We have our own things to do, our own jokes and conversations. And here you're a delicate, fragile girl. You can't even say a strong word in front of you. And what if someone takes a fancy to you? They'll take you away. I wouldn't want that, he explained. Stacy smiled. She was pleased with Matthew's explanation. Still, he spent too much time with his friends and came home drunk too often. The cloudy eyes, the wobbly gait, the odd wandering smile on his lips. It was a condition that frightened Stacy. And so it went for several years. Stacy and Matthew lived together. The young people became almost a family. At first, the girl dreamed that they were about to get married and, like everyone else, start planning children. The prospects were breathtaking. But these hopes were not destined to come true. Matthew was changing. Maybe he'd always been like this. Stacy just looked at the man she'd chosen through rose-colored glasses and didn't notice his flaws. In fact, at first, Matthew was trying to charm Stacy, showing his best qualities. He knew what it took to attract a girl like Annie. Matthew was disappearing more and more with his friends. Stacy waited for him at night, worried about what might happen to him on the street at this hour. Matthew had come home beaten up a few times before. He often came home drunk. Sometimes, far past midnight, the guy would fall on the couch and start singing loudly, even though he had to go to work in a couple of hours. Naturally, Matthew was unable to work after a night of drinking, and problems with work began. No employer wants an unreliable employee who can easily oversleep and not show up on time. Once or twice you could tolerate it, But when it happened again and again, Matthew was fired. The periods when the guy was out of work and out of money became longer and longer. During this time, Matthew was supported by Stacy. She paid his rent, bought groceries, and even gave him pocket money. He asked for it, and Stacy couldn't refuse. She genuinely felt sorry for Matthew. He was so sincerely remorseful each time, and he promised so convincingly that it was the last time it would happen that he would get clean, explaining his attachment to the bottle as a result of his difficult childhood. How could one not feel sorry for such a person? More on that later. Matthew changed not only outwardly, but also inwardly. He became aggressive. Now he could just yell at Stacy, call her names. Most of the time it was about money. Matthew demanded a lot of money, and Stacy's salary was small. The money was barely enough for the bare necessities. Matthew would just blow through her paycheck. Stacy couldn't even afford to go to a cafe with her friends once a month. Matthew hung out in bars almost every day. He and his buddies took turns throwing banquets. When it was Matthew's turn, he'd ask Stacy for money. He hadn't worked himself in years. Why should he? He was doing well enough. Stacy, of course, had long hoped for a miracle. She believed that with her love and attention, she could pull Matthew out of the swamp that was dragging him deeper and deeper. Stacy offered to take Matthew to the movies, dragged him out for walks in the evenings, tried to find him a job herself. It was all to no avail. A couple of times Stacy wanted to leave Matthew, even packing her things. But when Matthew saw this, he tearfully begged her to stay. "I'll manage, won't I? I love you so much. I'll be lost without you. You'll see, I won't be able to live." Stacy sighed and stayed. She really thought Matthew would be lost without her. She was very angry with her husband's friends. They were the ones Stacy blamed for what was happening to Matthew. Matthew is such a good guy. He's exactly the kind of guy I fell in love with. But unfortunately, Matthew has fallen in with the wrong crowd. His friends are dragging him down. As time went on, Stacy didn't see any change for the better. The girl suffered a lot. It is necessary to meet her love and again to lose a loved one because of addiction to drinking. Well, it was not her destiny. Living with Matthew was getting harder and harder. He didn't work at all. He didn't even work part-time like he used to. He was taking money from Stacy. She had to go grocery shopping on her way home on payday. She also transferred the rent to the landlord at once because her card was in Matthew's hands and he was looking forward to that day. And then that was it, no more money. Stacy tried to argue. Of course she wouldn't give Matthew the card, explaining to him that it was wrong. But then he'd lose his temper, start screaming, smashing everything around him, calling Stacy all kinds of names. His eyes would glow with rage. Stacy was afraid of Matthew at those moments, even though he'd never laid a finger on her. "Why do you need him like that?" wondered her friends, who were aware of what was going on. "Throw him out of the house and let him live as he likes." If only it were that simple. For one thing, Stacy still felt sorry for Matthew and loved him. Stacy cared about Matthew. Moreover, she even felt responsible for him. Secondly, the girl was elementary afraid. She realized that Matthew wasn't going anywhere, and if Stacy ran away from him, Matthew would chase her. He was becoming more and more aggressive. It was simply dangerous to make a man like that angry. Stacy could see that Matthew's behavior and her own life were only getting worse. But she saw no way out of the situation, and so she accepted everything as it was. She even tried to justify Matthew's behavior. He didn't hit her. He truly loved her. He had swore at her when she was about to leave him. And then that terrible November evening came. Stacy came home early. It was a shortened day at the remedial school. The head of the department was celebrating her anniversary. Stacy returned in high spirits. She had received a bonus as one of the best workers. Pennies, of course, like her salary, but still nice. Stacy's paycheck was small, but she liked the work itself. She knew how to deal with special children. Stacy was happy to see her little students succeed. Each one she looked for an approach, and it was even interesting. But unfortunately, working in a government agency didn't pay very generously. Stacy was offered to move to a private developmental center with good money, but she could not leave the students who were so drawn to her. There were some of them who had no contact with anyone else at all. So for now, Stacy hesitated. So the girl came home early. Matthew was sitting in the kitchen, far from sober. Stacy was very tired. It had been a long week, and there were mountains of dirty dishes, ashes scattered on the table, crumbs on the floor, and things strewn about the room in disarray. Matthew's things. Stacy felt herself starting to boil. "Matthew, what kind of pigsty have you created here?" "What pigsty?" The boy looked around the kitchen with a hazy look. "Clean it up. Now." "You want it? You clean it up," Matthew retorted, reaching for another cigarette. "She's going to boss me around. I've been at work all day. I'm tired. And you're sitting at home? I don't even ask you to cook, though I could." "At least you can clean up after yourself," Stacy said. She realized she'd been wrong to contact Matthew too late. Stacy hadn't expected him to react that way. Yes, he could snap at her, call her hurtful words in response to a remark. But this time it was different. The guy suddenly grabbed his knife and moved toward Stacy. His eyes burned with a vicious fire. "You bitch, I'm so sick of you. You're always buzzing around my ear like an annoying fly." "Matthew, what are you doing?" "Put the knife down." Stacy reached for the door in fear. Matthew obeyed and threw the knife. It fell to the tiled kitchen floor with a cold sound. The guy walked over and punched the girl in the face so hard she couldn't keep her footing. Stacy hadn't realized Matthew was so strong. Her cheek immediately flared as if it had been burned by fire. Tears sprang from her eyes. Fear gripped Stacy's heart with an icy grip. She knew Matthew was capable of anything right now. She could see it in his eyes. "I've wanted to do this for a long time," Matthew smirked. "Now I'm going to do it my way. Do you understand? You're not going to open your mouth at me anymore." Stacy nodded. She knew better than to argue with Matthew. He was capable of anything. As if to prove his point, the boy walked up to her and shoved her so hard that she hit her head on the wall. Then Matthew also kicked the girl in the back. It must have been a weak kick, but the sharp pain immediately spread through her body. "You know who's boss, don't you? You'll get more of that next time," Matthew said, and disappeared contentedly into the bedroom. Naturally, Stacy didn't wait for the next time. She knew it was dangerous to stay in the apartment with Matthew. He might even send her to the afterlife. His eyes were cloudy, half crazy. This was not the man Stacy had once loved. The girl stood up, waited until she was no longer dizzy, and slipped out the door. She didn't even take her things. She only grabbed the bag she hadn't had time to take off her shoulder. It contained her cell phone, her papers, the essentials. The rest was just a matter of time. The important thing was to get away from Matthew. He's a scary man, a monster, and Matthew is capable of hurting her, of maiming her. Even more than that, the girl has never been so afraid for her life. Stacy hurried down the stairs, fearing to hear the footsteps of an enraged Matthew behind her. He wouldn't think she was capable of escaping. But where would she go? She has no relatives in the middle of the night, no money either. Of course, Matthew will be furious when he finds her missing. Stacy wanted to be as far away from home as possible at that moment. The girl popped out into the cold November evening wearing a light coat, uncomfortable heeled shoes. It was cold, dark, uncomfortable. Stacy flew forward, unable to see the road. To keep warm, she jumped on the first bus she could find. It gave her time to catch her breath. Warm interior, soft seat, quiet, cheerful music, minimal passengers. Stacy stared out the window at the cityscape and wondered where to go. Nothing came to mind. Yes, Stacy had her friends Kira from work and her former classmate Mealy, but both were married with husbands and children. She didn't want to embarrass them. She started calling local hotels. As luck would have it, all the rooms were booked. What to do? "Sure," said the stern female conductor, interrupting Stacy's frantic attempts to find a place to stay. The girl inhaled and stepped out of the cozy cabin into the unsightly night. A cold rain started the evening. Stacy's coat was immediately soaked through. The girl was completely frozen. Then she saw a supermarket in the distance, a place where she could wait out the downpour and think calmly about her situation. There had to be a way out, and Stacy would find it. She would. Just have to hide from the rain first. "But I've been sitting here ever since." Stacy looked at Andrew as if waiting for his verdict. "I think we should report him to the police," the man said. I can tell you've never been in this situation before, Stacy smiled. But when the police arrive, they'll find Matthew calm and sane. My words mean nothing. There's no sign of a beating. The police will leave and I'll be alone with Matthew. What do you think he'll do to me after that? Andrew shook his head. Yes, Stacy, of course you're completely right. Matthew will get away with it. Stacy, don't you have anywhere to go at all? No, the girl sighed sadly. Don't think anything bad. I'd like to offer you a place to stay tonight. I have a big house. I live there with my daughter. You will rest and then decide how to proceed. What do they say? The morning is the morning. I hate to embarrass you, but I really don't have anywhere else to go. That's true, so I'll take it. Andrew realized that it was a strange, risky decision to let a complete stranger into the house, except that he couldn't leave the girl in trouble. She really needs help. It wouldn't be a big deal if Stacy slept over. Evie's nanny looked at Stacy with surprise as Andrew let her step forward into the house. But she didn't say anything. She was a professional and knew better than to meddle in the personal affairs of her employers. Evie's asleep in her room, the nanny reported. I wanted to wait for you, but you were late today. Thank you very much, and I apologize for the delay. Of course you will be compensated for those hours. I'm sure they will, Nanny smiled. You're always very generous. Andrew showed Stacy to the guest room. The girl looked around in surprise. It was probably the first time she had ever been in such an environment. High ceilings, wide staircase, stylish interior. And you only live here with your daughter? She asked. Yes, the two of us, sighed Andrew. Excuse me, but where's the girl's mom? She is no longer there, he replied sadly. Andrew has long been accustomed to this question. Many people were surprised that the father was raising his daughter alone. Make yourself comfortable. Take a hot shower, you need to warm up. The fridge is down there. Take whatever you want. There are clean robes in the guest bedroom. All in all, make yourself at home. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry to bother you, Stacy said. It's no bother at all, Andrew smiled. The main thing is that everything ends well for you. Andrew went to his room. On the way, he looked into Evie's bedroom. The girl was sleeping sweetly under the blanket, putting her hand under her cheek. Her hair was strewn across the pillow. A light blush played on her cheeks. The nightlight on the nightstand glowed faintly, as always. Evie was afraid to stay in the dark. Andrew took a quick shower, changed into his pajamas, and laid his head down on the pillow with pleasure. How tired he was today. It was a little strange to realize that there was a stranger, a complete stranger, in the house right now. But Stacy was just a confused girl in a difficult situation. She wasn't lying, Andrew could feel it. By his age, he had learned to be a pretty good judge of character. Andrew woke up from an unusual sound, glanced at the clock. It was almost 4. What's wrong? There were still hours to go before the alarm clock rang. What woke him up? The singing. It was a quiet, gentle singing, something subtly familiar, even native. Andrew raised himself on his elbow and listened. The singing seemed to be coming from Evie's bedroom. What the hell was that? And then it hit him. He remembered that Stacy, the girl with the hard luck he'd picked up from the supermarket, was sleeping at the house tonight. The man jumped up and rushed into Evie's bedroom. Why was this girl sneaking into his daughter's room? What was on her mind? Andrew wanted to rush into the nursery to give the guest an interrogation, but he was stopped by a ringing child's voice. Again. Let's do it again. My mom used to sing this song to me. Andrew cautiously peeked into the bedroom. He saw a touching picture. His daughter was lying in her crib, looking at the visitor with a smile. Stacy was sitting nearby in a high chair, stroking the girl's head and softly singing her a lullaby. Andrew remembered the song. It had once been sung by his wife to their daughter. But how had the little girl memorized it at such a young age? He froze, not believing his ears. The girl was actually talking to Stacy. She asked to sing the lullaby again and said that her mother sang it to her. Andrew's heart was pounding frantically. He was afraid to believe that his daughter had finally spoken after a long silence. Maybe he just imagined after a dream? That's it, baby girl. It's time for bed, Stacy smiled as she tucked the girl in. "Good night," said the girl clearly. Andrew barely held back a sigh of surprise. "Just don't you go away. We'll see each other tomorrow, won't we?" she asked. "Yes, I'll see you," Stacy nodded. As she left the room, she ran into Andrew. "Oh, we woke you up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," she fussed. "It's just that the girl screamed in her sleep, and I ran to soothe her with a song, out of habit. She always helps my students." "But how did you know her name was Evia?" "I did not tell you," surprised Andrew. "How did you know?" Stacy was surprised. "The girl told me. We met her. Let's go into the living room. I'll try to make the suggested revisions, keeping it close to the original text. I have a serious conversation to have with you." Okay, Stacy flapped her eyes in confusion. She couldn't understand what was going on. Oh. In the living room, Andrew slowly and thoroughly told her Evie's story. He had to mention Kira's death and the girl's many diagnoses. You see, since Kira's death, Evie hadn't spoken a word, and then suddenly she spoke. "I didn't realize she was speechless," Stacy said, surprised. "She got in touch with me as soon as she heard the lullaby. She said her mom used to sing that song to her." "Wow, poor child still remembers, although it would seem was quite tiny then," sighed Andrew. "I have a proposal to you, since you have such a beneficial effect on Evie. You are also a teacher. You have experience in dealing with special children. Could you be a kind of nanny or teacher for my girl? You don't have a place to live now, and here you'll have your own room. I won't hurt your salary." "Wow, this is so unexpected," Stacy exclaimed. "I'd love to be Evie's nanny, but I have a job. I can't leave my students, you know." "I understand," Andrew nodded. "You don't have to sit with her all day. The main thing is to come here after work, communicate with Evie, on weekends, maybe spend some lessons with her, or just walk. Naturally, if you need time to yourself, it's not even negotiable." But at any given moment, Andrew was willing to do anything just to keep Stacy by Evie's side. That girl had worked a real miracle. But what if she suddenly disappeared and his girl went silent again? What if leaving Stacy would be a new trauma for her? Stacy stayed at Andrew's house. She turned out to be a very smiling and friendly girl. Evie loved her new nanny, or as she called her friend. Stacy always knew how to keep her entertained. They drew together, made plasticine, even embroidered. Evie was talking now. Andrew couldn't believe it. "I make edits to the text, keeping it close to the original." Strangely enough, the speech of little Evie turned out to be very literate, developed. It turns out that all this time she was learning unnoticed from others, absorbed everything like a sponge, and now quietly built beautiful and long phrases. And it also turned out that Evie is an incredibly capable girl. She had a talent for the exact sciences, Stacy had said repeatedly. She'd make a great physicist or mathematician, she repeated. Stacy was a little wrong, however. Evie turned out to be a promising computer programmer. When in the 5th grade she started computer science, the girl immediately demonstrated outstanding talents. The teacher, of course, could not help but notice it. She immediately began to send her capable student to Olympiads of various levels, and almost always Evie returned with awards. Andrew couldn't get enough of his daughter. He was very grateful to Stacy because it was thanks to her talent, or rather her gift of communicating with special children, that Evie began to speak again. Stacy was in denial. "She's not my client. She didn't have any serious diagnoses or disabilities, just stress. That's how she reacted to losing her mother. I had nothing to do with it. She would have talked sooner or later on her own." Andrew didn't agree. He knew for sure that if it weren't for Stacy, his girl would have had to go to a special school for kids with serious mental health issues. And then what would Evie be like now? By the time Evie started winning her first awards as a young programmer, Andrew and Stacy were already married. Yeah, that's what happened. They were living side by side. At first, all their conversations revolved solely around Evie, and then somehow, gradually, it became clear to both of them that there was something going on between them. They were drawn to each other. It was pointless to deny it. By the way, Evie had been involved. The clever girl saw everything, understood everything, and was very happy about it. It was she who pushed her father to make the first step. One day, Evie told Andrew straight out that it was time to ask Stacy out. "You both need a date," the 10-year-old said with a sly smile. "Go ahead, ask her to the movies." "And you do not mind? Why would it, I wonder?" surprised Andrew. "I, on the contrary, in favor," nodded Evie. "Only next time we'll go out together somewhere. Deal?" So with Evie's encouragement, Stacy and Andrew began to meet, and then more and more. Soon it became obvious to both of them that they were literally made for each other. And so the wedding took place. Quiet, modest, but very beautiful and somehow cozy. Now Evie had a little sister, Mealy. She's 2 years old now. She is very perky and quick, just like her older sister at her age. By the way, it was Evie who chose the name for the baby. She adored her little sister, babysat her, taught her everything. Dressed up the little girl as a doll and even boasted about it in front of her many friends. Andrew was happy. He has a favorite loving wife and 2 wonderful daughters. Healthy, beautiful, intelligent. They have a close-knit family where everyone loves and supports each other. Stacy and Evie, they are like girlfriends in general. It's so nice to watch them when they do something together, cooking, discussing plans for tomorrow, choosing outfits for an event. Sometimes Andrew wondered what would have happened to him and Evie if he hadn't met Stacy at the supermarket, or would have walked past as he'd intended to do at first. Perhaps it was fate itself after all. The widow of the late doctor arrived at the old house, and barely had she gone to the village wedding. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. Already half an hour ago, he was supposed to be at the reception organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes to remind him not to be late. And he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of the plan. I don't know what happened out there. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. And then stop again. All the cars behind and front on the side were already considered, and the drivers could be considered familiar. And that car overtook by half a meter. And now it was 1.5 meters behind. Some kind of entertainment, an old man in a Volga in front. Some sticks with red rags on the ends stick out of the trunk. On the left is a girl in an Audi. She talks on the phone all the time and occasionally looks at Alex with interest. On the right, the most desperate or the most brazen occasionally fly by on the side of the road. What's ahead of them is unknown. Alex wouldn't be nervous at all. Well, a traffic jam and a traffic jam. At last one could rest. But he imagined what Stacy would say to him when he got there. If he did. It's the wife calling again. "Where are you? I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here." "I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam." "Can't or won't." "Stacy, I'll be there as soon as I can." Alex dropped the call. He doesn't need this reception. Let the investors talk to the clinic management. Why invite the department heads? What's the joy of celebrating a birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people? Alex saw this investor once at the clinic, and suddenly he's honored to be invited, and with his wife. He would have preferred to go home, spend a quiet evening, read 2 interesting articles sent to him a month ago. Instead, he was going to some party where he had to keep a straight face and socialize with uninteresting people, and was indecently late. Stacy, unlike her husband, was glad of the invitation. She had rarely been able to attend receptions of this caliber. Was it not so much to look at others as to show herself? She realized that on her own, as a schoolteacher, no one in this high society is not interesting. But she was with her husband. And this husband, damn him to hell, can't get there. The ones who jump on the side of the road go somewhere. Maybe we should try it. Alex drove to the side of the road, skidded along the potholes for 500 meters and again found himself in a traffic jam, now on the side of the road. Further, the curb ended, and it was possible to pass only on the road. And those patiently standing in the lane were in no hurry to let those who liked freebies through. They wanted to cheat fate, so stand there now. And in another half an hour, Alex returned to the lane. A Volga with sticks and red rags loomed ahead. What he left from, he came back to. Irony of fate. Looks like he's only coming to the appointment to pick up his wife. That's fine. It's a shame about the time, though. We're finally getting going, and soon the cause of the jam became clear: a terrible accident. 3 cars and 1 truck. Rescue workers were scrambling around. People were pulled out of the cars. Then the emergency cars, like scrap metal, moved to the side of the road by machinery. 1 lane was freed for traffic. Drivers carefully drove around the crash site. Alex saw the wrecked cars of rescuers and ambulance doctors. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a man sitting on the ground by the truck's wheel with a crazy look, clearly in shock. Alex turned towards the accident. A lifeguard immediately ran up to him. "Get back on the road. This is not a circus. I'm a trauma doctor." "Oh, well, go ahead then. You're the man for the job." There were 10 victims, all with serious injuries. A guy was badly hurt, his spine was damaged, and a young woman, whom rescuers couldn't get out of the car for a long time. Her 3-year-old daughter, frightened and crying, was examined in an ambulance. Doctors dealt with the heaviest. The others with fractures and injuries were waiting their turn. Alex had been stuck in traffic for 2 hours. He was supposed to be at the reception, organized by the investor on the occasion of his birthday, half an hour ago. He'd driven straight from the clinic and hadn't even gone home to change. His wife Stacy called every 10 minutes, reminding him not to be late, and he was late. A traffic jam this bad wasn't part of his plan. I don't know what happened. The cars stood dead still, shifting a meter every 5 minutes. Alex looked at the surrounding cars and drivers, trying to distract himself. In front was an old man driving a Volga with some sticks with red rags sticking out of its trunk. On the left, a girl in an Audi was constantly talking on the phone and occasionally glanced at Alex with interest. On the right, desperate drivers periodically pulled to the curb. Alex himself wouldn't be particularly nervous, but he imagined what Stacy would tell him when he finally arrived. If he did arrive. His wife called again. "Where are you?" "I don't know what to say anymore. Everyone's here, asking about you. You don't realize how important it is for you to be here." "I really don't understand the importance. I don't know what I'm supposed to do there either. But I'm going. I can't fly over this traffic jam," Alex answered. "Can't or won't?" Stacy kept up. "I'll be there as soon as I can," Alex said tiredly and dropped the call. He didn't feel like going to this appointment at all. Let the clinic management talk to the investors. Why call ordinary managers? To celebrate someone's birthday in a crowd of unfamiliar people. Alex has only seen this investor once. He would prefer to go home, quietly read interesting articles, rather than go to a party where you have to keep your face and talk to uninteresting people, and even be indecently late. Stacy believed that the power of words could be used to keep students from doing bad things. The main thing is to properly explain what is good and what is bad. Her sincere impulses touched the students, and they agreed not to upset the young teacher, taking a kind of patronage over her. At 13, these idealists were convinced that they knew much more about life than their naive, saintly mentor. The whole class went hiking together, watched new movies, skated or played beach volleyball. Thus, in an atmosphere of mutual illusions, Stacy brought her class to graduation. Apparently, her teaching efforts were not in vain, because after graduation her students did not disappear from her life. They congratulated her on her birthday and New Year, came to share their troubles, or just to chat. Teachers with great experience and merit believed that such trusting relations with students were an indicator of professional unsuitability. Our task is to provide education, and to make friends with students is the height of unprofessionalism. There is not enough mental strength or time for everyone, they said. Most likely they were jealous of Stacy, but for some reason they couldn't admit it. In high school, Stacy met Alex. He was 12 years older than her, a mature and confident man. His son went to this school, and one day his father came to the parent-teacher conference instead of his mom. Alex was attracted to this enthusiastic teacher with an unconventional approach to pedagogy. He divorced his wife 3 years ago and had no contact with her at all. The separation from his son was too painful. They met only occasionally. That day Alex came to the parents' meeting for the first time in his life because his ex-wife suddenly called, threw a tantrum, and demanded that he immediately dropped all his affairs and went to the school to save his son. What to save him from, she didn't explain. Why she didn't go herself, it was clear she was in no condition. Alex realized that most likely nothing terrible had happened, but still went to the school. One should be aware of the events. And suddenly Kieran really needs to save his son, if not from the school, then from his mother. Alex hadn't seen Kieran in a while. We need to talk. He was ready to take Kieran with him, but he was afraid that his ex-wife, left alone, would go crazy. And Vincent, feeling sorry for his mother, refused to move in with his father. Alex was worried, but he didn't think it was possible to put pressure on his son. He was an adult and would figure it out on his own. After the meeting, Alex approached Stacy. He really didn't understand why his ex-wife was so hysterical. AC in physics? A conflict with a classmate isn't a disaster. It's just high school life. Unpleasant, sure, but no reason to declare a rescue mission. Stacy confirms there's no problem. Vince is a wonderful boy, a little withdrawn, but kind and talented, she said. Alex had already realized that all students were wonderful and talented to her. She would even justify a bully and find a lot of positive qualities in him. An amazing girl. There aren't many like her left. Alex always came with flowers, gallant and courteous. Stacy's friend, history teacher Kira, in common parlance Millie, colorfully told how the teachers reacted to her novel. These envious women can only discuss you. For them, teacher and nun are synonymous. You can't have a teaching career if you've got a man. Or rather, you've got the wrong guy. If you'd brought out some loser, that's a yes. And self-sufficient, independent man they will not appreciate, and therefore in your selfless labor. A happy, loved, prosperous woman. What can she teach her children? How will she prepare them for the rigors of life? Millie mocked them. You're overreacting, Stacy countered. Half of our teachers are married. Married ones are there, not happy ones. How would you know? Millie countered. Why do they make you feel bad about yourself? Why don't they just be happy for you? Tell me. If I was going to marry a good man, what would you say? I'd wish him happiness, Stacy replied sincerely. Millie was right, none of her co-workers were happy for Stacy. They were just gloating and wondering when Alex would leave her. You don't have to get married, Stacy said. You do. Don't give them anything to gloat about. There's no turning back. Stacy was in love. Alex was so serious, so thorough. He was even courting like he had a plan. It was all clearly laid out. The fact that Alex was married didn't bother Stacy. It was strange if a man had never been married by the time he was 40. What confused her was that he never said a word about his ex-wife. So many years together, they had a teenage son, and it was as if Alex had erased her from his memory. What had happened between them? Why had they divorced? Stacy wondered. Alex wouldn't tell her, just dismissed it. She's not in our lives anymore. I wouldn't think about her at all. But there's a son. I've helped him, and I'll continue to help him. Don't worry, we'll be fine. And indeed, everything was fine. They arranged a small wedding trip, rented a house for a week on the coast in Miami. Sun, sea, and no one but the two of them. They just didn't need anyone. Stacy looked at her husband, and only one thought was racing through her mind. How do I love you? How is it that of all the men on earth, I got the best one? She was ready to stare into his gray, most beautiful eyes in the world all day long. No one had ever been so happy. Stacy began to doubt her mental faculties, for she could think of nothing but her husband. Only love and happiness. In all the years that followed, when longing struck, Stacy remembered that week of boundless happiness on the ocean, and it warmed her heart. She longed to return to that place and experience the same feelings again, to remember what it was like to be truly happy. 7 years of life together flew by unnoticed. Love, of course, did not go away, but it became ordinary, not causing the same excitement. When Alex didn't show up for that important appointment at the clinic, Stacy took offense. He'd left her alone among strangers. No one cared about her. Her co-workers tried not to leave her alone, but everyone was vapid. Stacy felt superfluous. When someone looked at her, she felt like she was being pitied, perplexed as to who she was and what she was doing here. She was still hoping Alex would come. When he stopped answering his cell phone, Stacy hailed a cab and headed home. She'd had enough of this embarrassment. At home, she stood in front of the mirror. A tall, slender woman in an elegant dress, with a beautiful, intelligent face, looked back at her. She felt sorry for this beauty, she cried. She had been preparing so much, dreaming that everyone would appreciate their beautiful couple, would say compliments, and Alex would be proud of his wife. Instead of compliments, indifference. Instead of a pleasant evening, longing and loneliness. Stacy cried until midnight, then got angry. Then she calmed down, deciding that she shouldn't get worked up. Alex was about to come and explain everything. He did come, but Stacy waited in vain. No explanation or apology followed. Alex didn't even ask how the evening had gone. Either he didn't remember the reception or he thought it was nothing. Stacy couldn't take it anymore, walked over to her husband, snatched the magazine from his hands, threw it on the floor, and asked, looking into his surprised eyes, "Where did you go yesterday? Aren't you interested in how I had fun? You left me alone and now you won't even explain." "Stacy, I'm tired," Alex replied, picking up the magazine from the floor and continuing to read it. And that was it. No more explanations followed. That's how indifferent it was, just impenetrable. How badly it made my soul feel. What should I do to make him come out of his shell and show some feelings? Change him, or what? Die, maybe? I wonder if he'll notice. Probably just happy to be distracted from work again. Another sleepless night and desperate loneliness in the morning. This morning was neither good nor wise. At any rate, neither were the evenings. Not a single wise thought came during the night. What to do with a personal life that was going downhill? Stacy decided to take the tried and true route. She should go to Millie's. She always had a way of setting things right. Millie's loyal friend was a big fan of Alex, thought Stacy was complaining about her fat. There are no husbands like her anymore, and you can tell from experience. Millie had been married twice over the years and considered herself an expert on husbands, both her own and other people's. Her first husband was an artist, a musician, a poet, 3 in 1. Life with him was a total celebration, a wrench in the air. Millie said that mostly in her head he was fun and unpredictable. An unrecognized talent, an unaccomplished genius. A bohemian, a boy who hadn't grown up. Husbands are like trained animals in the circus, Millie said. He seems to be trained, but it's not clear what to expect from him. And we lived in starvation from lack of money. Millie went to the other extreme. Her second husband was a boring middle-class bureaucrat. Not young, unattractive, but with means and connections. The presence of a young and beautiful wife sharply raised his authority in the eyes of colleagues. So he spared no expense on his doll. In addition, his wife a schoolteacher, somehow out of status, so now Millie taught at the university. All would be nothing, but tolerate his boring Millie Long could not. She got divorced and got a good apartment in the city center from a miser as a payoff. Now she was in full chocolate and in the active search for the next husband. Millie sincerely thought that her friend was lucky. Alex is handsome, smart, and a great doctor. Not boring, doesn't drink, doesn't cheat. What more do you need? She'd never had a love like Stacy's before. All she could do was dream and envy. Stacy showed up looking as gloomy as a cloud with tears in her eyes. "Why don't you have a quiet life?" Millie asked. "He doesn't notice me at all. If I disappear, he'll only realize when he can't find supper. And supper isn't always at home, so he won't find it right away. He doesn't care about me at all. Remember when I went to college, I consulted with him. I couldn't make up my mind. A month ago, he asked me how I was doing in school." "Stacy, are you exaggerating? I don't get the image of Alex in my head. It's not about him. He's a reasonable man. Yeah, he's very busy with work, but that's good. Who's so obsessed with work that they forget their wife at appointments? You think he's got a woman?" "No, he doesn't. But maybe it would be better. At least it would be clearer. You, girlfriend, don't take it out on your husband. He's tired, he'll come to his senses, and everything will be fine. For a man like your Alex, you'll have to look harder." "What man?" Stacy was outraged. "I'll throw him out, take him to the woods and leave him there." "I'm sorry to hear that," Millie grinned. "Stacy, my friend, where are you?" "I don't need this. What are you doing? If you throw him out, they'll pick him up. Look, I really don't understand what's wrong with you. There's no such thing as crazy love for life. You've had it. But I haven't. 2 husbands, and not one heavenly love. You're a lucky girl. Don't make God angry. Maybe you're right. Stacy sighed. What's the matter? I'm coming at you again with my melancholy. You're welcome. I'm always at your service. A few days later, all the news programs started with breaking news from Alaska. Another earthquake had struck there. The country watched with bated breath the statistics of dead and wounded. Rescuers and doctors from all over the country flew to Alaska. Alex was going to be part of one of the teams. Stacy, you have to understand, I can't not go, because I'm needed there now, he said. Don't worry, I'll be home in a week. Stacy watched the news like a bulletin from the front. One day she saw Alex in a story about doctors. Worried, she called him. He answered. Her heart ached. She chased away the dark thoughts what could happen. He doesn't go into the rubble. He helps those who have already been harassed. Suddenly there was a new jolt. More dead and wounded. Alex didn't call for 2 days. He didn't answer the phone. Finally a call. No, it's not Alex. It's an unfamiliar number. Yeah, I'm listening, Stacy answered. Stacy? It's for you. Your husband Alex was killed in Anchorage during a debris removal in the village of New Life. I'm so sorry for your loss. We're covering all transportation costs. What's not covered? What transportation? Are they talking about Alex? What do you mean, dead? Is everyone out of their minds? Stacy dialed Alex's number. He wasn't answering for some reason. She heard a ringing in her ears. Then there was a rumbling sound of someone banging on the door. She got up, went to the door, stood looking at it, not understanding how to open it. Something unpleasant had been said to her. She couldn't remember what. Who was knocking like that? There's a bell, isn't there? Stacy opened the door. Behind her stood Alex and fellow doctors from the clinic. What's up? Are they here? It's not Alex's birthday, she said absently. Suddenly it was clear in her head, dead. Condolences. Stacy didn't remember anything else. She woke up when the coffin was lowered into the grave, screaming, rushing in. She was held, thrashing in someone's arms and screaming. Then the memory lapsed again. Like Millie and Vince were saying something, feeding her something. When she came to, she was surprised she was alive. No, not surprised. I was upset. Why alive? Millie, like a guardian angel, was always there to keep Stacy from falling into the abyss. She calmed her down, persuaded her, drew prospects, pushed her into action. In short, after a couple months, Stacy could be talked to without fear of going crazy. To be honest, Millie hadn't expected Stacy to be so out of it. I get it, a loved one had died, but to throw herself so out of her life, Millie looked after Stacy herself. Gradually, she came to her senses, went back to her normal life. It was depressing, but it was manageable. The I can't live without him thoughts were gone. At least she tried. Things gradually settled down. Stacy shuddered at night, cried. Sometimes she even forgot to grieve during the day. Then she remembered, but she didn't grieve as much. It was almost 6 months after Alex's death. Then one day Millie suddenly asked, Stacy, have you applied for an inheritance? What application? Why? Well, your husband had assets like this apartment. It's his apartment, by the way. Here. And he has a son, an heir. The ex-wife can't claim, but the son can. I'm guessing you and Vince are going to have to share the apartment. And if he doesn't inherit, there's nothing to split. So get the deed to a notary tomorrow. That doesn't make any sense. It hadn't occurred to Stacy that she'd have to share the apartment she'd lived in for so many years, used to thinking of it as hers. It was only now, after Millie's words, that she realized she wasn't. She's a resident. She can't be kicked out, but it's not her apartment. The notary was a young girl with a stern look, and not at all respectable hair, a ponytail on top of her head. She looked at the documents, accepted Stacy's application, and explained thoroughly that she would inherit half of the apartment, half of the car, and half of the dacha by law. She advised her to negotiate with the second heir, Vince, for the child. How do we divide it all up? Who gets the car? Who gets the cottage? Who gets the apartment? Stacy was prepared to give up the car and the summer house if they'd let her stay in the apartment. She just didn't have anywhere else to live. She knew it wasn't equal. Vince probably wouldn't mind, but his mother was still there. Some strange notice came in about land and property tax arrears. Stacy thought at first it was for the cottage and the apartment. But why in her name? The all-knowing Millie advised her to go to the registry and find out what was going on. Oh, that counselor. I'm having second thoughts. That's not good, Stacy sighed. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex's ex-wife was up to something. But signing the property over to me so I don't have to pay taxes. That's stupid, even for her. And last year's taxes. Maybe Alex signed something over to me. We didn't buy anything. Everything we own was bought a long time ago. The registry gave Stacy a deed to a 53-square-foot lot and house in Brooklyn Village. Brooklyn who? What house? I've got an apartment to take care of. The only thing missing was the house. She was upset. Life was getting a little too stressful. Unable to understand, Stacy called Alex's friend and colleague Joshua. But Joshua, did Alex say something to you about a house in the country? You mean Brooklyn? It's a nice cabin. I loved it. Janie and I stayed there for a month last year. Alex said he bought it for the future, and he's going to build it into a cottage and live there when he retires. Why didn't I know about this? And why did he put it in my name? I can understand that. He's older than you. Probably wanted you to have something of your own in case something happened to him. He didn't tell you because he didn't have to. He wanted to build a palace for the princess first, and then bring the princess to the palace. Who knew he wouldn't make it in time? Oh, I'm sorry. What are we going to do with this palace now? Whatever you want. But I wouldn't sell it if I were you. It's a wonderful place. You should go and see it. The doorbell rang. Stacy said a quick goodbye to Joshua and went to answer it. Standing outside the door was an inebriated woman with permanently dyed red hair. The woman shook her red curls. Without waiting for an invitation, she entered the apartment and walked through the rooms. Who are you? Stacy asked. Me. My son Vince owns this apartment. I want to live with my son. You don't have kids, you don't understand. I'm going to live with my son. But Vince only owns half of the apartment, and the other half is mine, Stacy argued. Great. We'll live together. I don't mind roommates. How are we going to divide up the rooms? Look, you can't be serious. We can't live in the same apartment. I don't want to. Well, if you don't leave, we'll have to. Think about it. I'll bring my stuff the day after tomorrow. Bye. What do we do now? What do you do in a situation like this? You run to a friend. So Stacy went to Millie's. She called Vince, asked him to come over. I wanted to know if the idea of living together was his mom's fantasy or their decision. Vince wasn't reassured. His mother's decision was Alex's revenge, albeit belated, to get Stacy out of the apartment. Vince had urged his mother, offered her options. But she wouldn't listen. She didn't want the apartment so much as she wanted to show her power. She's not going to give up. She's going to ruin her life any way she can. Vince left. Her friends were left to grieve. Why don't you buy half the apartment off her? If it's not enough money, I'll add to it, Millie suggested. I'm afraid she won't sell. It's important to her to humiliate me. She's dreaming about how she's going to humiliate me, ruin my life. She won't take any money for that kind of pleasure. Vince knows it's impossible to live like this, but he can't do anything about it. She's got this idea to move in with me. It's fun and revenge for her miserable life. You should have seen her. She has a goal to kill me. That's the kind of fun she'd like to have. Listen, is this crazy woman seriously going to live with the widow of her ex-husband? Millie was horrified. Apparently so. Moving in with me, she will live for now, but then it will still need something to do with the apartment to decide to sell, to divide. Well, you've been on the prowl, and I've been running around. No, friend, I'm not my enemy. I don't want to be without you. Who do you want to be with? Living with that crazy woman in the same apartment. I'm not seriously considering it myself, Stacy said. I have an unfinished palace. I'm going to go check it out. Where? The country? It's in the middle of nowhere. No, it's not. I looked. It's only 200 kilometers away. I need to recover. I'll go, then I'll wake up and decide how to live my life. Millie, I feel like I need this. If I don't try to start over, I'm gonna die. I don't know. Maybe it will work, Millie said doubtfully. It seemed like a decision had been made. But it was so scary to change her established, stable life for the unknown prospect of living in a village Stacy had never been to. But then some builders showed up, measuring the height of the opening and asking which walls were load-bearing. Clearly, they were doing a huge renovation. Are you registered here? The woman asked. Well, live here. No one is forcing you out. We have a reservation. Stacy quickly put her things in her bag and rushed to the bus station. Didn't wait for the red-headed vigilante to show up. Enough with the nerves. Though in the queue at the ticket office, she suddenly remembered that she had a car. She was kicked out of her apartment, so at least she could have her car. I didn't doubt that they would track her car. They wouldn't deny themselves such a pleasure. But for now, we can drive to the village. Where am I going? What for? How will I live? I'll figure it out when I get there. Strange village. Not a lantern, not a light. The time is 21:00, and the village is dead. Either they're asleep or there's no light. Where do we go from here? Where's the heir to the estate? Yeah, there's people here. Apparently the car is a novelty around here. Crawled out to have a look. At least they'll tell us where to go. They did. But they looked warily what kind of a lady brought here at night. And there's really no light. There's probably a candle somewhere, but how do you find it around here? Stacy shined the flashlight on her phone. She found the bed and went to sleep. I'll figure it out tomorrow. She couldn't sleep with hunger. She broke all the cookies she'd taken on the road. There was nothing else to sleep on. Stacy didn't immediately realize where she was. Oh yes, the village. No lights, but there was a manor. I'd have to look around. I'm also very hungry. Is there a store here? Stacy's house was impressive. Nice furniture, big windows, curtains, dishes, fridge, TV, everything. You could tell Alex really wanted to live here. Everything's been thought out and arranged with love. He didn't tell her anything, but he made it look like he'd consulted her. Stacy wouldn't change a thing about this house. She loved it. The house was neglected and unkept, but that was fixable. Stacy stepped out onto the porch. It's beautiful. It's like a garden. Lilacs in bloom, pink apple trees, some shrubs she didn't know the names of. Unsupervised raspberries grow all over the plot. Under the apple trees in a thicket of burdock stands a table. A swing hanging from a branch. The ropes are almost rotten. Behind the house, impassable cherry tree stands a solid white wall. Then I'll have to climb the plot to see what else grows here. But now it's not about flowers and berries. I have to find a store and buy groceries. Because I'm so hungry I feel dizzy. There was salt, sugar, macaroni, a pack of tea, and a bottle of sunflower oil in the refrigerator, which was turned off. Probably hidden from the mice. Stacy took out the groceries, turned on the refrigerator, and went looking for the store. A woman in her 60s looked at her curiously from behind a neighboring fence. "Daughter, who do you think you are?" The house was empty. "Today I saw someone walking around the yard. The owner, Alex, is here, a doctor from the city. Are you his wife?" She called out. Widow Stacy said the word aloud for the first time. It was sharp, harsh, hopeless. It divided life into before and after. "Oh, I'm sorry, you old fool. I'm minding my own business," the woman said. "My name is Esmeralda, Aunt Esme, and what's yours?" "Stacy. Can you tell me where your store is?" "It's right down the street. It's right downtown. It's got the store, the school, the administration. You'll have to come and see me if you need anything." "Thank you, Aunt Esmeralda." Stacy walked down the street, looking around the village. It was interesting and completely different from her idea of rural life. Once upon a time, while still in college, she had traveled to visit her friend Maggie. It had been her first and only experience of village life. Since then, Stacy was sure that the countryside was dusty streets with lush grass, old houses and vegetable gardens with potatoes and cucumbers. And certainly no decorations in the form of flowers and ornamental bushes. A village is poverty, lack of amenities, and hard work. It's no place for flowers. Whether that village was in the middle of nowhere, or whether things had changed dramatically over time. But now Stacy was pleasantly surprised. In Pokrovka there were good houses. In front of each yard there was a well-tended front garden. Even the streets were not gray and dusty, but green, with flowering trees and bushes. The appearance of a new person in the village was an event. As they walked toward the store, curious eyes peered from behind every fence. 15 times Stacy said hello and explained who she was. Vigilance in the village was at an all-time high. No one passed unnoticed. Somehow the rumors got to the store before Stacy did. 10 people came to see the town girl. The store was full. Nobody bought anything. That's not why they came. They waited, wondering why she'd come and how long she could hold out. They're not evil people, but they're wary of anything new. They know their own people inside and out. It's clear what to expect from whom. This one will give his shirt off his back, the same spender. This one's eager to help. This one's a slacker. But they're all family members. And here's someone who's arrived. They say she's young and beautiful. That's a problem too. There are only 3 single men in the village. We don't have enough. And there's competition. They looked at Stacy frankly and appraisingly. They were careful to ask questions. You're beautiful. Are you coming here for a long time or just for a week? No, I'm not staying for a week. I don't know how long though. What are you going to do? You must be some kind of manager, right? Or a designer. You don't know how to work with your hands in the city. Yeah, I'm not much of a teacher. That's good. We have a big school. We need teachers. But it's hard to live in the countryside. In winter it gets so snowy you can't leave the house. At least we have gas, so we don't have to heat the stoves. And you can't live without a vegetable garden. And they don't bring vegetables here. Aunt Kate didn't scare the man who attacked Stacy. The sales clerk did. I don't carry vegetables. You're not going to buy them. If I have to, I will. No way. Who eats these store-bought vegetables? Can't we share cucumbers and tomatoes? You, daughter, come to my place. I still have some potatoes and carrots left, and I'll give them to you. Thank you. Ladies, are you going to buy anything? If not, go with God. It's like a social club in here. Stacy picked up some groceries. It's a little heavy. We need a bucket, a mop, dishwashing detergent, window cleaner, and a few other little things. I can't carry everything. Are you going to clean up? The salesgirl asked. Well, yes. The house has been closed since last summer. The dirt has accumulated. Let's do it this way. You take what you need now. I'll bring the rest of the stuff along with all the cleaning supplies in a couple hours. My husband's coming home for lunch, so we'll load everything up. And after work, I'll come and help. You're going to be cleaning this house for a week. My name's Digit, by the way. Yeah, that's a little awkward. Come on, I'm curious about you. I'm curious about what kind of bird you are. Let's get to know each other. Oh, I'm Stacy. You don't have to tell me. The whole village knows. Stacy came out of the store, looked around. Here's the school. You can see the kids running around in the yard. It's either gym class or practice or something. I should stop by and see what jobs they have. See if I really have to stay here. So where do we start our new life? Should we make some food? No, sandwich and tea first, then cooking. You're going to choke on your own saliva. After the sandwich, Stacy thought things were looking good. Life was getting better. Now, Digit's bringing in some household chemicals. The first thing to do is clean the windows to get some sunshine and shine. Stacy looked around the house. The gray furniture, the dull windows, the dusty curtains. If everything was washed, it would be cozy. Where's Digit? I can't wait. Digit arrived, as promised, with a young man. A handsome, smiling blonde. Maybe not a fiancé, he was interested, looking interested, clearly trying to please Digit. His name was Alex. Okay, we're off. Alex has to go to work. Digit pushed Alex towards the door. I'll pick up Millie from the garden tonight and come over. What Millie? Stacy didn't understand, but Digit was already running to the car. Millie turned out to be a little red-haired girl named Alice, Digit's daughter. The work went faster with the helpers, and in the course of the evening they had cleaned most of the house. There were still some little things left to do. Tired, but encouraged by the result, sat down to drink tea. But Millie didn't make it to tea, she fell asleep. Digit, who's Alex? They say there are only 3 single men here. One of the 3 was killed, Stacy asked. You should have seen those bachelors, laughed Digit. The most eligible one is Uncle Vincent. He's about 60 years old. You're not going to get anything. He's been courting your neighbor Aunt Esmeralda for about 30 of his 60 years. For as long as I can remember, he's been doing it all his life. He can't make up his mind to propose. And the second bachelor doesn't get a second look from even the most stale 40-year-olds. Nick went to school in the big city. They say he's a computer genius, works from home, lives with his mom, doesn't go anywhere, doesn't talk to anyone. His mom said he was married. The village doesn't believe it. Someone thinks he is abnormal, but everyone agreed he is unfit for socializing, much less marriage. The headmaster didn't mind. It's a good thing, but impossible. In the school for several years did not work gymnasium. There was no money for repairs. The hall is almost emergency. Physical education lessons were held outside, running and soccer in summer, skiing in winter. Then Kiran, the athlete's name, disappeared from the village for a while. Then he came back with a decision to finance the renovation of the gym and a coaching position. That's when it turned out that Kiran, a 3-time national boxing champion, lives in their village. True, he hasn't performed for a long time. He refused to participate in the world championship. And why no one knows how he ended up in this village is also a mystery. But the locals were sure that there was a woman involved. His daughter was also not candid with anyone, seriously engaged in boxing. Kiran took her to district and regional competitions. Our girls, of course, became animated, poked fun at him and so, but to no avail. He's kind of withdrawn and unsociable. It's like he and his daughter don't need anyone at all. He's only friends with Andrew. But that's how we call the school principal. His real name is Alexander Sergeyevich Voloshin. As bachelors, everything is clear. But where did you get your Alex? Or is he married? Stacy asked. No way. It's too expensive to get involved with married people here, said Digit. We've had a couple of stories like that around here. They didn't end well. Alex is from a neighboring village not far from here. It was a big village with a big school. Kids from neighboring villages went to school here. The school bus brought those who lived close by. The children from the distant villages lived in a boarding school. Digit and Alex had known each other since they were in the 1st grade. As Alex told Alex later, he fell in love with Digit in the 4th grade. Digit was a girl with a lot of wind. She liked one boy or the other. It wasn't until her senior year of high school that she noticed Alex. But what a love it was, a real, youthful love. For life, of course. When it was impossible to breathe without each other, they drew a calendar and crossed off the days until their 18th birthday, when they could get married. Digit's parents weren't against her relationship with Alex, but thought it was a little early to go into the army. Then fine. Digit enrolled in Lyceum. Alex went into the army. In the city, Digit was surrounded by new life, impressions, acquaintances, new love. Digit became pregnant, and the future father suddenly disappeared, not appreciating the happiness that happened. Digit cried and went back to her mother. She cried too and said the usual "I told you so." She hugged her wayward daughter and began to prepare for the birth of the baby. Digit avoided Alex. She was ashamed to look him in the eye, but at night she cried, pitying her first love. That was it. Her love life was over. She would have no love, no family. One joy, red-haired Alice, her mother's happiness. Alex couldn't get over his Digit, tried to live without her, but it didn't work. You know, Stacy, he says he can't live without me. We need to be together. After all, we've lost so much time, said Digit, relaying her friend's words. I don't believe it. How can you forgive betrayal? I chose my destiny. I'm fine, and I don't need anyone. And he just keeps coming and coming. Everything's fine. My eyes are wet, replied Digit. She chose her fate. Ask your fate if she doesn't like your choices. You've been given a chance to get it all back, to be happy. So grab it. Why are you showing off your pride? Stacy said. I can't get anything back. Not a chance. Oh, Stacy, I'm sorry. I'm just sitting here complaining. Silly me. Digit, if you love me, don't be stupid. Now, You've made your mistakes, don't make another one. You'll never forgive yourself. Oh look, there's plenty of time. Digit picked up a sleepy Alice. Oh my darling. It's a shame to wake her up, but she's a big girl. Not Nika. Okay, bye. I'll see you tomorrow. Digit. Thanks for your help. It's a lot of work. Don't kid yourself. For a couple more days, Stacy tidied up and shined. The house was clean, cozy, lived in. It's beautiful. If she could just get the grounds sorted out, it would be a manor house. But Stacy couldn't tackle the grounds alone. She'd need a lot of muscle. All right, we'll do it slowly. Sitting at home all day was getting a bit boring. Stacy decided it was time to go out, at least to school. Stacy had imagined the headmaster of the village school to be old, fat, with glasses, shortness of breath, and the tired look of a troubled man. But he turned out to be young and energetic. When Andrew learned that a certified, experienced Russian teacher had come to visit him, he was overjoyed. "Stacy, you have no idea how we work here," he said. "I am a math teacher, and I also teach physics. A chemist teaches biology, geography, and a history teacher teaches Russian. You understand what level of knowledge? The only foreign language we have is German. And there are no other teachers. We study in 2 shifts. Not because there are too many students, not because there's not enough space, but because there aren't enough teachers. Come on, I'll show you the school." Andrew talked about the school only in the superlative. He was proud. Stacy hadn't expected that a school in the countryside could be as well equipped as any city school. The chemistry lab, the computer lab, the language class, everything was top-notch. Maybe the repairs are simpler, but the atmosphere is home-like. "It's cozy," Stacy said in the gym. A boxing ring was set up in the far corner. Students crowded around it. From the excitement and cheers, something very interesting was going on. Stacy didn't understand anything about boxing, thinking it was a martial art. What kind of sport is it where they hit each other over the head all the time? Andrew walked toward the ring. Stacy preferred to watch from a distance. She can't even watch it on TV, much less live. In the ring, the fight was over and the athletes took off their helmets. Stacy was amazed to see that it was a girl waving her fists. Short, frail, pretty, about 15 years old. The coach came up to her. Tall, strong, with powerful arms, he hugged the girl, said something, and she nodded and agreed. Kiran. The principal waved his hand at the coach. "Come here, Alex, I have a training session." "Your training will wait," said Andrew. "Go," I said. But he addressed Kiran by his first name in front of the students. That's fine if they're friends, but there are professional ethics. After all, a blow to the head doesn't go unnoticed. Stacy, the principal, addressed the new teacher. "This is Kiran, the coach. He's got all the boys from the village here. He's got the little ones and the ones who've left school. Kiran, Stacy will be teaching Russian, I hope." "Hello," said the coach. Up close, he looked huge. He looked at me with a frown, not at all friendly. He did not care about his new colleague, about the Russian language. A rude bore. At least he pretended it was nice to meet you. I'm surprised his children aren't afraid of him. A girl who had just fought in the ring approached them. "This is Joshua." Andrew smiled. "Our pride, a champion of the district and winner of regional competitions. Dad says she's very capable. She belongs in big sports." "That's my daughter," Kiran muttered. "I'm sorry, it's probably none of my business. But aren't you afraid for your daughter?" "It's not a woman's sport," said Stacy. "It's none of your business," said the coach. "Okay, that's it. We're done talking. Time to go. Andrew, thanks for the tour. I'll bring the documents tomorrow. Bye." Stacy walked towards the exit of the gym. She heard the principal quietly reprimanding Kiran. "Are you out of your mind? What do you want? Bear horny. You're not mad at Daddy?" Stacy caught up with the boxer girl. He promised with his boxers. He forgot how to talk to women. "How are you guys settling in here? Do you want me to help you?" "I'm afraid Daddy would mind." "No, he won't. He's not mean, he's just unhappy. He needs to come out of his shell and socialize. He doesn't want to. He's not here either. Let's be friends. And Dad, I'm sorry, I know he's in his own words. His conscience is killing him. He'll apologize tomorrow. Okay, we'll see. Hey Joshua, come by if you get bored. She's such a sweet girl. And she loves her daddy, Stacy thought. I wonder why she called him miserable. Something terrible must have happened. If a person is so closed in on himself, shut off from everyone with his ostentatious indifference and deliberate rudeness. Stacy liked the school and Principal Andrew. She decided she would be comfortable in her new job. One unpleasant person doesn't make the weather, and she's not interested in boxing. So Coach Kieran could be ignored, communication minimized. She was starting a new life, excited about the changes that were coming. No one would be able to throw her off her joyous mood. Not even someone as unpleasant as Kieran. Stacy caught herself thinking that whatever she was thinking about was being lumped in with that coach. That was just what was missing. What did she care about him? Stacy brought her diploma and employment history to school, wrote her application, and was hired to Andrew's outright glee. Too bad it's the end of the school year. But starting in September, everything will go according to plan. And now there is time to assess the equipment of the classroom, something to add, correct, prepare a curriculum. Joshua often came in, chatting and helping. Although Stacy had vowed not to talk to Kieran, she had to see him. He looked for and found her in the Russian language room after training. By the way, for the scene of acquaintance, he, as Joshua said, apologized. Communication was very low-key, hello, goodbye, how are you? Stacy finally got to work on the property. It took a long time to gather her courage, telling herself that it was no big deal, that other people could handle it. In full uniform, gloves, galoshes, with a shovel and hacksaw, went to war on cherry bushes up to 1/2 meter high. I dug, but no way they have roots, to the center of the earth, or what, grow to the center of the earth. I was digging something out, sawing something. I got tired, sat down under the apple tree, and got upset. There's enough to saw or not to saw for the whole summer. So tired, so frustrated. Evie caught her. Stacy, you can't do this. It's going to take a lot of heavy lifting. I'll tell my dad, he can help. No, that's not a good idea. No, it's not a bad idea. It's vacation time. School kids don't go to practice, only adults. That's 3 times a week. He made borscht yesterday out of idleness. Soon he'll start cross-stitching. He'd better do his niece more good by virtue of his great stature. The next day, Kieran came. Stacy felt so embarrassed. He'd think she was the sort of girl who'd look for an excuse to lure him into the house. Every single woman in the village tried that. I don't want anything, she said. I didn't ask for it. I can manage on my own. She thought Kieran grinned. That's a waste, Stacy thought. The awkwardness was gone. So angry, he grinned. You'll only be needed as a tractor, she jerked her chin and pointed with a royal gesture, the shovel is over there. Kieran was visible from the window first. She pretended not to be at all interested in what he was doing there, but she tried to peek discreetly. No sympathy for this man with a nasty temper, of course. But to say he wasn't handsome would be a sin against the truth. Then Kieran moved to another corner. You couldn't see him from the window. Stacy fiddled around. No, she couldn't see him. After about 3 hours, Stacy thought she was being indecent. He's working hard, and she didn't even offer him water. She took the bottle, walked behind the house, and was stunned to see there were no bushes. 5 gorgeous cherry trees along the fence, some bushes. Just a delight. Kieran was tired and asked for water to wash his face. Stacy brought a bucket of water. Kieran took off his t-shirt and splashed in the bucket. Stacy didn't look, but her eyes somehow squinted in that direction. Digit came through the wicket. Wow, she whispered. What's with the mating games? Why, it's the season, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? What are you talking about? Stacy was outraged. He was sent to me with the idea of making friends with you two. He's worried about his daddy. I'd be worried too if I were you. You're a good daddy, but he's no good for you, smirked Digit. He's no good for friendship. Only for love. Digit, stop mocking me. What are you here for? If you're visiting, shall we go inside? No, Stacy, I'm not visiting. I'm here to formally invite you to the wedding. Oh, you've really made up your mind, haven't you? You've brainwashed me so much I realize there's no more time to waste. The wedding's in a month. Of course, I could have brought the invitations later. But I'm so excited, I wanted to share it with someone. Digit turned to Kieran. Kieran. Can you hear me? I'm inviting you to the wedding. Why him? Stacy whispered so Kieran wouldn't hear. You don't know him at all. It's a whim of mine. I invite whoever I want. Digit waved her hand. Well, I'm off. The groom's waiting. Digit left. Kieran sat on the porch and Stacy didn't know what to do next. She was grateful, of course. Maybe she should take him out to dinner. She envisioned lunch, sitting across from each other, chewing and not saying a word. It's like a romantic date. If she didn't think of something now, he'd leave. Isn't that what she dreamed of? And now what? You're looking for a reason to delay. What, did you like him or inspire him? You want to get married? Yes, I did. I can't hide it. Not everyone would go to a woman who shows her disdain to uproot a cherry tree. Besides, he's so cute. Stacy hadn't thought of what to say yet, but Kieran had already put on his shirt and was about to leave. Evie saved the situation. She flew into the courtyard and gabbled. Oh, Daddy, I'm glad you're still here. Let's take Stacy to dinner. Stacy, you have no idea how good a cook he is. He also plays the guitar. What, at the same time? Stacy grinned. No, alternating. So, is it settled? Have you and your dad agreed on this proposal? Well, I don't mind, Kieran cut in. That's it. It's settled. We'll see you tonight. They left, and Stacy was surprised. Wow, this is all working out so well. I didn't have to make the first move myself. Kieran and Evie were walking home and he was singing. You're a clever and beautiful girl, but I think it's time you were whipped. Dad, you weren't faking it, were you? I see you like Stacy, don't you? What would you do without me? Thank you. Thank you. You'd be running around in circles for another year. It's too late for a whipping. 10 years too late, Kieran grinned. Stacy was going out, pulling out almost her entire closet to find an outfit that wasn't too flashy. He'd think she'd dressed up for him. It's boring. It's unfashionable. Here's a light-colored sundress with little flowers. Modest, but tasteful. God, if someone told me that I would dress up and be nervous before a meeting with a former athlete, desirable, I would spit in his face. That's how fate turned, Stacy thought as she dressed up and worried. So she got dressed up and went out. And then Aunt Esmeralda peeked out from behind the fence. In this village you can't go anywhere without supervision. Well, where are you dressed up? She asked. He's a good man, he's doing the right thing. Stacy realized that the village was already aware of their affair and was counting when the wedding was to take place. It's understandable to be bored and want to be colorful, but not to this extent, she thought. Though let them count, maybe it will come in handy. Dinner had been excellent. I couldn't believe Kieran had made it. How could she not? There's no restaurants here you can't order in. Evie was radiant, talking only about Daddy, how wonderful he was and what a sporting career he'd had. The girl really wanted Daddy to be happy. She remembered Mommy, remembered what love was like. But Mom is gone. She couldn't let her daddy live his life alone. She really liked Stacy. And she noticed that Stacy was looking at Daddy with interest. Evie's goal was to get them together. And if a child is up to something, parents are powerless. Kieran and Stacy had another fight. Everything was fine, talking, joking. Turns out Kieran isn't a letter at all. He's a very nice person. Stacy, who put you up to this? She's been going on about boxing not being a sport for girls. It's like stepping on a sore spot. For years, Kieran's been instilling in his daughter a fighter's character. Almost raised a champion. Now some inner-city franchise teacher who knows nothing about professional sports says his daughter should give up boxing. Yes, they embroider cross-stitch, but she can stand up for herself, resented Kieran. If someone hurts you, you will cry, but she will fight back. She'll grow up to be a strong sportswoman. Maybe it's my ambition. But I want my daughter to be a champion. If you had kids, you'd understand. He was hurt. This woman doesn't know anything, but her words hurt. He finally liked a man, but it was like they were from different universes. They couldn't understand each other. Stacy walked home. Evie caught up with her. Evie, go home. I'm sorry I hurt your daddy again. There's something I want to tell you. I think it's time. Kieran and Kira were a nationally known couple. He was a Russian champion, a brutal macho, virile and strong. She was a slim and delicate model whose photos were everywhere on billboards, on TV, on the internet. Kira gave up her career as soon as she found out she was pregnant. No doubt she does not need this whole show business, house, husband, child, nothing else. The birth was awaited with trepidation. The name was chosen long and carefully, but they did not agree. Kira wanted to call her daughter Jessica. She loved the sea very much. Kieran insisted on Evie. When Evie was born, the parents thought it was a miracle. It was useless to say that they were not the first, they were not the last, and others also had children, others just had children. But theirs was a miracle. Kieran wanted his daughter to be called Evie, so he secretly registered the child from Kira and brought the birth certificate, which clearly said Adams Evie Kiranovna. Kira loved her husband so much that she didn't take offense and didn't say a word against it. Evie. So Evie, no matter what you call it, still a miracle extraordinary. Kira took care of the house and the baby. Kieran was lost in training and competitions. He became Russian champion 3 times and was going to the World Championships. And he was 6 years old when his mom got sick. Evie didn't understand what her mom was sick with, but she saw that her mom was in a lot of pain. It's now she knows that mom had advanced stage cancer. They tried to treat her, looked for specialists, wrote to foreign clinics, all in vain. The worst thing was the feeling of hopelessness, the impossibility to change anything. Kieran never left his wife's side. Constant care, medication by the hour. Everyone knew Kira was dying, tried to keep her with him for a while. After his wife's death, Kieran refused to take part in the World Championships, and the risk was too great to entrust Evie to his relatives. He couldn't leave her to anyone, not even for a day. It seemed to betray Kira. The sports career was over, only coaching was left. And Evie dragged him everywhere with him. Slowly he started coaching. She liked it, and she had the ability. His pupils consistently became prize winners in competitions. He was proud of their successes. Life settled down. The longing for Kira did not go anywhere, but somehow subsided. But then the management of the club changed, and the new director began to hint that medals are good, but money is better. Kieran was not going to mix sport and business. He quit his job and moved to the countryside with his daughter. At least things are fair here, he said. While Evie sat in Stacy's kitchen, her dad poured his heart out to Vincent. What about it? No. Look, it pisses me off. What kind of woman is she? Everything's wrong. Well, don't go to her, come on. I can't. As much as she pisses me off, she likes it when she's conquered. That's the pithy man talk. Stacy seemed like Arabella in front of Kieran, and after what was said, Evie felt like a complete fool who, knowing nothing about the man, managed to judge and, worse, instruct. How many times had Stacy berated herself for her language? To keep your mouth shut. Stacy tried to see less of Kieran. Stacy seemed innocent, but it was scary to look Kieran in the eye. And he'd come over, clean the lot, fix up the house. Of course they met, and Stacy's heart sank, but she didn't have the courage to talk. Who would she ask for advice? Wilkie, of course. It had been a while since they'd gossiped. It's time. Stacy spilled every last drop. She didn't hide anything. Wilkie didn't see what the problem was. Any competition? Any takers? No competitors. If you don't like it, you like it. Too much. Girl, I don't understand you. You go off to the middle of nowhere and stumble upon a prince. What's wrong? The prince's horse is dead, and he can't get there on foot. Do I have to propose to him myself? No. Wait a minute. I'll come back in a couple of weeks, and we'll decide what to do. Vincent said conquered how, with the whole estate dug up, the fence repaired, the taps and locks in good order. What else is there to do? In response, silence. All decent, polite and indifferent. It's no use consulting Vincent. He's already making fun of him. Kieran's pouring out his heart to him, and Petrenko's watching. He's laughing, and he can tell he can barely contain himself from laughing. Alex, do you think it's funny? I'm in front of him, and he's laughing. Yeah, laughing. There's a big guy sitting there and he can't say something about how he feels to a woman he likes. Of course it's funny to you. You got a wife, kids. I want a wife too, by the way, and not just any wife, but a very specific one. You're Vincent, of course, and I'm a boxer. If I hold on now, I risk getting my nose punched. My friend Kieran, when was the last time you climbed into a woman's window? What's windows got to do with it? There are parallels. It's got nothing to do with windows. It's all about the woman. Okay, you're the thin, ironic one. I'm thick, straightforward. Probably dumb, too. I don't get your parable about the windows. Are you hinting? I'm not hinting at the window. Romanticism is the way to go. You shouldn't climb through the window, of course. The result is predictable, either a night in jail or a black eye from a frying pan. Giving flowers is also not an option in our realities. What's Kieran gonna do? Bring her a drugstore chamomile? A rose from Auntie Esmeralda? There's no movie theaters or restaurants. Look, I never realized we were so bad at romance. Vincent sighed. Not much else, and we haven't come up with anything in 3 weeks. Alex's wife, Nelly, ironically in her maiden name of Goncharova, had been eavesdropping for a long time. What are the men talking about? My God, what primitive creatures they are. It is good that God first created them, and then, looking at his creation, decided to improve it. And the result was a woman she resented. When Nelly realized that the men were at an impasse, she decided to intervene. What the hell are flowers? Invite them to a dance at the club. Let the youngsters beat it. Buy a ring and go to propose. And if she says no, of course she'll say no. It would be strange if she agreed to marry me out of the blue. But she'll think about it, start evaluating the pros and cons. And what does that mean? That you, Kieran, will always be in her thoughts, and she won't be able to think of anything else. Only you. Isn't that what you want? Natasha, do you think it will work? Kieran hesitated. It worked for Andrew. Which Andrew, this one or that one? This one, I guess. It doesn't matter, as long as it worked. While Kieran was devising a plan to win Stacy over, she had an unexpected visitor. Vincent had arrived. Stacy was overjoyed. A family man, Alex's son. A reminder of happiness past. Vincent came with the express purpose of persuading Stacy to move back to the city. I've put the apartment on the market. Half of it's yours. Obviously, you can't get the same one, but you're going back to the city, he said. Vince, I would never claim my dad's apartment. We have our own place, Stacy said. But Mom's got a thing for this place. Why are you the main target? I get it. She can't get back at Dad anymore. She's taking it out on you. Vince, why sell? I mean, she was going to live there. She started renovations. She started renovations and she's done with them. Her goal was to torment you, and you just left. It's ruined, Vincent said. She doesn't need this apartment without you. Dima, I'm not going back to the city. Maybe someday, but not now, Stacy said. We'll go for a walk in the countryside. You'll see it's not a shithole at all. Look at my plot of land. I could use the money from the sale of the apartment. I really want a bathhouse. Dimka, how glad I am to see you. And how did you find me? Millie cracked. I won't say. But I thought there's another husband on the way. She didn't even give me a hint. Vincent grinned. Dim, are you coming for a couple days, or are you staying with me? Evie stood in the doorway. Stacy, Dad wants to know if you're coming over for dinner. We've got a guest. I'll go tell him it's dinner for 4, Evie said, and ran off. Sveta, I think I'll stay with you, don't you? Vincent asked. Yes, of course you can. But this girl is the neighborhood boxing champion, so be careful. The village has long since realized what's going on. It's just that these young men can't make up their minds. They're city folk. All those who had their sights on Kieran realized that they were out of luck, and nobly stepped aside. I wanted to make a scene, of course. She came here, stole the only decent man, but what was the use? He didn't pay much attention to their charms without her. But you can tell him you loved him so much, but you let him go. Be happy. Noble. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. Everything seemed fine without the romance. Vincent's arrival somehow made it almost like a family. Lunches and dinners together, conversations over tea. Vincent didn't want to leave the house until almost midnight. And that was good for Kieran. Andrew and Nayli nudged Kieran. Don't be silent. She may not love you yet, but she's definitely interested. If you don't ask, you won't know. And Stacy has a visitor again. And what a guest. Millie's here. Millie's not just visiting, she's on a rescue mission to help her friend who's been missing. It seems Mila had an important event in her life that she wasn't in a hurry to tell her friends about. Her main goal was to help Stacy get back in touch with Kieran. We don't need a prince without a horse. We'll only look at the prince, Millie said after their first dinner together. Sveta, he can't take his eyes off you. He's a gorgeous man. I'm not talking about looks. There's nothing to talk about. He's so monumental in terms of character. A real counselor. Take a good look. You'll never meet another like him. What am I telling you? You know it. But for some reason you're stalling, or rather he's stalling. Well, it doesn't matter. You can push it. Millie, why don't you say something? Are you getting married? Come on, spill the beans, Vincent asked. Millie was indeed getting married. She assured him that she had no mercantile interests in the marriage. Knowing her friend, Stacy doubted that. The fact that she had been introduced to her future husband by her ex-husband suggested something. If it was an artist or a poet, one could believe in pure love without regard for money. But the fate of Millie decided to arrange her second husband, and in his entourage of people who believe in selfless love, there were no. He invited Millie to a pathos reception, where she met a young and handsome businessman, who coincidentally turned out to be unmarried. Now, Millie was doing everything she could to change his single status to married. Millie, besides being single, do you know anything about him? Young, good-looking, rich. What else is there to know? Stacy asked. Well, he's not that young. Do you know exactly how rich he is? Or did someone tell you? He's a businessman. So he's got money. Anyway, I know he's good-looking, Millie joked. Look, you're not a stupid woman, and you're not poor, by the way. I never thought you were someone's prey. You can't even tell me what his business is. What, he never told you? Why didn't you ask? You've always been 3 steps ahead. What happened now? I can't believe you're blinded by mad passion, Stacy said doubtfully. I've never met your businessman, but at his age and his money, you can't be lonely. Millie, are you saying he's a con man? I'm afraid he's an Alfonso. Honey, that's just my impression. I'm not insisting, but take a closer look. Don't be so quick to jump into the deep end. You've already taken the plunge twice. Kieran kept trying to talk to Stacy alone. It wasn't working. It's easy to say, don't be quiet, say it was Joshua, or Vincent following her around. And now Millie was in the way. There was a time and place, of course, but Kieran didn't look for it. He was afraid that if she didn't say anything, there was a chance she'd say no, and he'd have to step aside. And then how to live. One evening, when Joshua and Vincent had gone to the club and Millie had tactfully withdrawn, Kieran made up his mind. Stacy, you can see I like you. You don't have to say anything. If you say you're so nice but I don't want to hear it. I told you so you'd know. You already knew. Now you know for sure. Think it's up to you. Roma, I don't know what to say, Stacy replied, confused. It's good that you don't know, but I have something to ask. Or rather, advice. Kieran gave her daughter a shocked look. He'd raised her to be an athlete, a champion, and suddenly she said she wanted to be a lawyer. Why all of a sudden? All that hard work, all that training, all that success. Now it's all for nothing. And she won't listen to anything. I got a job on vacation as an assistant at a law firm. I drive every morning to the neighborhood of law offices. Since September, I've been enrolled in pre-law classes. I'm determined to go to law school. What do you want her to do? Become a champion? Then what? Ever wonder how your daughter will live after she finishes, no matter how brilliant her athletic career, with no education, no family, no kids? Stacy said. "Don't tell me you can do it all. You know you can't. Your daughter is wiser than you are. Don't let her get in the way." Stacy and Kieran had no way of having a romantic conversation, almost quarreling. Stacy decided to consult Millie. If her decision was firm, Stacy would back her up and Dad couldn't resist the two of them. Kieran couldn't think of anything romantic to do. He suspected Pushkin was mocking, but the idea of climbing through the window kept coming up. "What do you mean romantic?" "Well, it's like a magic wand Digit's wedding." Kieran was preparing for Digit's wedding as if it were his own. He was even more excited. What's a newlywed couple to worry about? They've got it all figured out. He had total uncertainty. The wedding was a village wedding. Neighbors dragged pickles, homemade sausage, roasted chickens, compotes to Digit's house. The men had built a table for half a yard and benches to match. Digit's girlfriends made up riddles for the bride price and contests. Stacy was invited to the wedding, but she refused when she saw their tasks for the groom merely crossing the boundaries of propriety. How did you guys have fun in the city? We have the internet. We see your flowery jokes. We don't expose our lips and other body parts. We don't change sex. That's embarrassing. And we're just having fun, the bridesmaids parried. The wedding was epochal. On the bride's side was one village, on the groom's side another. The bride has a richer village, and the groom has stronger men. The fight did not happen, although earlier the saying "what wedding without a fight" was relevant. The bride justified the nickname Monkey, then grabbed the hem of her mother's lush dress, then hung on Alexa. Contests, jokes, toasts, songs, dances, people were having a lot of fun. Not often in the village there are events of such scale. They say that if the guests sing a lot at a wedding, the life of young people will be cheerful and happy. Now there will be enough talk for a month they will retell who did and said what. The heroes of these stories will say, "It never happened." Maybe it didn't. It doesn't matter. And the annals of the village has already been entered, and with each retelling will be added new colorful details. If this omen works, then Digit and Alex will be the happiest people in the world. They'll also laugh on and off. Vince, the accordion player, played all night with a drink break. Did he have time for an appetizer? No, the people demanded songs. They sang the most heartfelt ones. "There are so many golden lights, oh Kalina blossoms on the Morom Road." And of course Vladimirsky Central. And Central sounded especially heartfelt, although there were no prisoners in the village. Due to the fact that Vince did not have time to snack, in 3 hours we were left without an accordion. The young people rejoiced. At last we can turn on some normal music. Of course they did, but after about 10 minutes the older ones demanded, "Turn off this crap and turn on something soulful." The guys didn't know what was soulful for them, so they turned on Disco 80s. They got it right. Even those who never got up from a chair went dancing. To the song "Where the Maple Trees Are Noisy," Kieran walked up to Stacy and held out his hand. "On the river wave." Stacy put her hand on Kieran's shoulder. "Talked about love with you," she thought. They were dancing. Kieran thought, "This is romance," and then suddenly it sounded, "Love is like a dream. It's gone." What do you mean it's gone? It hasn't started yet. Wrong song, he thought. No, it was the maple trees noisy. Stacy's heart sank. She wanted to tell her love so badly, but it seemed like a man should be the first to say. Kieran didn't talk about love, but he did say he'd take a step after her. "No, I can't take that step." "Why don't you say something, you chump with no feelings?" Stacy chastised herself. The wedding was in full swing. There was singing and dancing, and Stacy suddenly remembered her and Alex. She remembered the wedding without longing, without hopelessness, with sadness, sorrow, and gratitude. For the first time since Alex's death, thinking about him was just a bright memory. But the tears did come. To avoid spoiling people's holiday, Stacy got up from the table, walked out of the courtyard, and walked toward the river. She didn't want to let go of her thoughts about Alex. The stinging sadness didn't hurt anymore. Stacy felt like Alex was letting her go. It was as if Mila had heard a voice. "Go on living, be happy. Don't rush back to me, I'll wait." Kieran followed Stacy, but Millie stopped him. "Don't let her be alone. She's saying goodbye to the past. Don't bother her." Millie didn't let Kieran go, she followed. That's it, she realized. Stacy's not going back to town. Her fate is a bit stymied here, but she's not going anywhere, Millie thought. That's what makes her so short-tempered. She deserves such a trustworthy man. Hey, what's her bad luck? She's always getting some fake prince. I just want to be loved. I guess to be loved, you have to love yourself. Fate is like a boomerang. It gives you what you put into the world. Stacy knows how to love, but Kieran is still calculating and guessing. I guess he miscalculated, Millie pondered. Well, what are we young and beautiful? We've got time for more. Millie found Stacy. She was sitting on the bank, looking out at the slow river. Millie sat down beside her and put her arm around her. Don't be sad, girlfriend. Say, are you going back? Not right now. The school year's just started. I can't just quit. It's a bit scary, of course. How will I live here in winter? But other people live here. They won't let you go to waste. Of course they won't. Especially a big one like that, Millie laughed. It's so funny to look at you. It's like Beauty and the Beast. The Beast is very handsome, though, and he can't take his eyes off you. Millie, what the hell do I want? I can't get Alex back. Does Kieran love me? Why do I get such great men? What's wrong with you? You're a bit hasty on the get part. Millie, what am I supposed to do? I like Kieran. Joshua wants his daddy. He's doing everything he can to push him. Vince has joined us. He's been here for 2 days. He's been staying for 2 weeks. It all makes sense. I like it. I don't get it. Honey, I can't just tell him I love him. He's healthy. He's strong. He's not afraid of anyone but me. Nothing. We'll get through the winter, and then we'll see. I'm going home tomorrow. I came to save you, but there's no one to save you from. I'm going to deal with my businessman and my ex-husband at the same time. Kieran glanced furtively at Stacy, though he wanted to look at her without stopping. He thought that fate had given him a chance to be happy again by sending this wonderful woman, but there was no way he dared to accept this gift. Fate might get angry. What could be easier, a hug, a kiss, to tell her how much I love her, he pondered. On Maylee's advice, he even bought a ring, even though he thought it was foolish. Stacy thought it was impossible to step into the same river twice. She was already happy with Alex and wouldn't be able to love like that again. But love has to be different. With the experience of troubles and mistakes, she decided. Millie's friend is right, Stacy does have luck with men. Fate has kept her from making mistakes. They say fate doesn't choose, but gives you a chance not to make mistakes. I didn't make a mistake with Alex and I won't forget him. Just as Kieran will never forget his wife. We have similar destinies. One grief for both of us. Then happiness must be shared, Stacy thought. She hoped that if Kieran didn't dare to speak, their shared happiness might not happen. Come on, Kieran, say something, she mentally pleaded. Kieran didn't say anything. Kieran did. He hugged Stacy, kissed her, and pulled a ring box from his pocket. Stacy, will you marry me? He asked. Stacy was confused. There was such a look of bewilderment on her face that Kieran laughed. That's exactly the reaction I was expecting, he said. That's what Nayeli said. What Nayeli before Pushkin said that. You'll say no, but you'll think about it. Or will you not refuse? I know it's foolish to hope you'll say yes right away. But you'll take the ring. You'll look at it and think of me. Stacy smiled enigmatically and pressed herself tighter against Kieran. She thought to herself that she was already thinking about him.